Welcome to the Glendale Parking and Transportation Commission. Today is Monday, September 28th. May I have the roll call, please?
Item 1, regular business agenda. Item 1A, roll call. Commissioner Merabian. Commissioner Sahakian.
Here.
Commissioner Wiseman.
Here.
Commissioner Welch.
Here.
Chairperson Sulayan.
Here. Next item.
Item 1B, flag salute. Chairperson Sulayan.
I would like to ask Commissioner Wiseman to perform the flag salute. Thank you.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item.
Item 2, posting of agenda. The agenda for the Monday, September 28, 2009 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Friday, September 25, 2009 before 5:30 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Any comments? No. Next item.
That is the next
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Item 3, approval of minutes. Item 3A, August 3rd, 2009 special meeting approval of minutes.
No comments.
No comments. No comment.
Okay, approve as is.
I move to approve. Motion. I'll second it.
Thank you. Next item.
Item 4 is oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision.
Okay, I have one speaker. Ms. Rita Guild.
Thank you very much. I am here because of a concern for the safety of a crosswalk on the section of Central and Fairview. I am the parish coordinator at Incarnation Church on Brandon Glen Oaks. And 3 years ago, we purchased the United Methodist Church, which is directly across the street from us. There is a crosswalk that comes from our property here, right across here. And immediately we were very concerned for the safety of this because of the curvature of the land here coming to the crosswalk, and there is also curvature coming here for people who are coming south on Central. Visibility is difficult. Also, people do not stop. In the 3 years that I have been going back and forth from the property while we were doing renovations, in the beginning, I could stare people down, but now they don't stop at all. They just, as long as they think they can clear you, they go right on, and they don't slow down at all. We're at a point where we're going to be beginning to use the property. It has a large gym, so we will have children from our elementary school going across to the gym for games and for practices. We also, because of the limited parking here and the adequate parking on our property, will have people who are going to events over here, parishioners, having to cross also over Central to get to the property. Originally, we did have a parishioner talk with the transportation department about the possibility of getting the lights that are for pedestrian crossing, and they were said that they're told that they were not installing those anymore, and that there really wasn't anything that could be done. I have spoken with a fire inspector, Kawamoto, when he's been over in terms of fire inspection for the property and getting our permit, and he has twice contacted the Transportation and Traffic Department, and we have gotten no results from that. Last week, we made a presentation to the Glendale Police Advisory Council because of our concern, and we're taking a next step, hoping to be able to find a resolution that will meet, everyone's concerns, particularly the safety. As I say, cars don't slow down. There almost was an accident yesterday when somebody did stop for a pedestrian, and the car behind him wasn't prepared to stop and had to screech to a halt and try to avoid the car in front of him. Several people have stated that they've actually been frightened by having to cross the street because of the way the cars are when they approach them. You really don't know if they're going to stop or not. There's a light on Glen Oaks, and then there's a light on Dryden. Otherwise, there's nothing telling people to stop, or really, there's not much warning that there's traffic there. I do also have some pictures that I've taken that show some of it. There is only one light there in the evening, so the lighting in the evening is also very bad.
Is the property across Central or across Fairview?
The property this is the property here, we're over here, and this is where the crosswalk is.
That's a marked crosswalk with hash marks, correct? If I
That's
recall?
correct.
It is, yes.
Yes. We do also have a preschool that will be going back over to this school for some events, too, so we're also talking about very young children, too, besides elementary school kids, and adults of all ages.
Mr. Chairman, we've been contacted, and I'm in touch with the gentleman, Mr. Rick Barnes, I believe. We'll be looking at it, and as far as the location of the crosswalk, I believe there's an additional sign has been installed to show that there is a crosswalk. With respect of people really being warned about that, I believe it's there. The signage is okay. It is in a blind corner. We will evaluate whether or not that would be a nice place to put in a crosswalk or not. Be happy to work with the school and make sure that we can address it the best we can. I will get your phone number.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Bagdanian, what we might want to do, I understand that the flashing pit crossing signals are not being installed anymore. What we might want to do, if there's advanced crossing signage, we might want to put a blinking yellow light on it to get more attention of motorists, because the only problem that I see is for northbound traffic. Southbound traffic seems okay, and besides that, I don't think it will probably qualify to install signals for make it a signalized intersection, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we'll certainly look at any advanced signage with flashers to see if we can make it more visible.
Are those flashers at night, are they fluorescent? Or you have to push the button also? Are they fluorescent at night? Can we see that?
Yes, you can see.
You can? Okay, thank you. Next item.
Item 5, reports. At 5A is the Glendale Beeline Transit System 2009 line-by-line analysis.
Okay, turn to Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, we have provided the Commission a copy of the Glendale Beeline Transit System 2009 line-by-line analysis, and we would like to make a presentation to the Commission today on the line-by-line analysis. The report is quite detailed and includes information pertaining to the service levels and potential service changes and fare increases for the Beeline. Commissioners, we would ask you to provide comments or input to us today, as we would like to present, after your comments and input, we will work with our consultant team to address your questions or comments. And our goal is to then set up a joint study session with the City Council to, have a discussion on this and get the City Council's input on the recommendations that we have, and then eventually finalize the report and implement the recommendations from the line-by-line analysis. In this case, for example, the fare increase is an option. It's a consideration. We'd like your input for that. We've provided the same report online. It's on the city's website, so anybody who's interested who can go into online and see the report. We've put in rider alerts in the buses to inform the Beeline riders that this issue is being discussed tonight at the Commission meeting, so that they have an opportunity to speak at the Commission. And tonight I'd like to also take the advantage of this presentation and generally provide an overview of the Beeline bus system for the residents of Glendale that we've been operating for a number of years, and also introduce staff that is working on the operation planning day-to-day operation of the Beeline. So with that, I'm going to turn over and first introduce Catherine Engel, who's our transit manager. She will give the first part of our presentation that deals with the existing system, an overview. And then after her, we'll turn over to Dan Boyle, who is our consultant who prepared the line-by-line analysis. Dan has over 25 years experience in transportation and in the public sector and the private sector. His firm provides assistance in different public transportation planning operations to clients throughout the United States. And the report that you have is prepared by Dan and his firm. So Dan will then take the stage and basically give you a presentation on the line-by-line analysis, and I've asked Dan to break down his presentation into pretty much 3 segments so that at the end of each segment, commissioners, you may want to ask questions so that we don't go to the end of the presentation. And if there are detailed questions that you wish to ask, we can have a little break in between so that Dan gets a chance to do that. At the end of Dan's presentation, we'd like to go essentially item by item on the key areas of the recommendations that's in the line-by-line study to jot down your input so that we can go back and study it, and if there are changes that the Commission is recommending, we will include that, and then we'll take that entire package for a study session with City Council. With that, Mr. Chairman, if you're okay with that, I'll turn it over to Catherine Engel to go forward with her part of the presentation and introduce staff that works with Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, we'd like to start off with a general overview of Beeline, kind of what is happening today. And we thought we'd start with kind of how we're organized. The Public Works Department obviously supervises the traffic and transportation function. And within traffic and transportation, you're very familiar with traffic engineering and some of the parking items that come before you. We also have an admin section and special projects, and then, of course, transit as its own function. It's important to point out that transit is a special revenue fund. So it's operated with transit-specific sales tax or taxes specifically for transit, and doesn't use any general fund money. Next, please. If we're looking at transit in general, I wanted to kind of show a picture of everything that we kind of deal with in our section. I'm the transit manager. Cindy Battaglia, who's sitting here next to me, is our transit assistant. Our assistant transit manager is ill today. We want to kind of give you a snapshot of what it is we do in our relationship to other folks. We're a department of the city, but we are really answerable to many masters because we're a public transit agency, and we have buses that are funded by federal transit money, and we operate in the state of California. We respond or answer to the U.S. Department of Transportation, specifically the FTA. Many of you are familiar with FHWA for the streets and highways portion, but the Federal Transit Administration does most of our regulations for both our buses and our operations. California Department of Transportation regulates us as far as operating on the streets and highways here in California, and does an annual CHP inspection of both our facility and our fleet. And then a lot of our funding comes as a pass-through through LA County MTA, and so they also have kind of a layer of rules and guidelines that we have to answer to and we report to every year. So we have kind of this relationship with our outside funding and regulatory agencies. We have a relationship with our subcontractors who are transit providers, and in this case we have our major contracts are the Beeline with MV Transportation and Dial-A-Ride, which it says MV Transportation. It's really Southland Transit. I just saw that, even without my glasses. And I'd like to introduce to you, we have staff here from MV. So I'd like to introduce Jesse Saavedra, who is our project manager with MV. Fred Hartage, who is our operations supervisor. And Nestor Villafuerte, who is our safety and training manager. We work very closely with them. We're really a partnership. We're only as good as they are as far as providing service and our maintenance. And we think we have a good relationship to both oversee those contracts and to work in partnership with how to deliver the best service we can in town. A lot of people always ask, what do we do? What does Cindy and I and Silva do on a regular basis? And it's really, it's hard to explain because there are no 2 days that are the same. So I'll give you a snapshot of what's happened maybe this last week. I deal with policy issues. So when the Metrolink train had their collision and there was a big brouhaha about using electronic devices, I evaluated our city policies and worked with MV in looking at their policies of what we do with electronic devices or the use of personal electronic devices while you're using any of our transit vehicles. As a result, we developed a more strict standard and issued a policy from the city that no electronic devices, whether they're GPS, cell phones, PDAs, anything, are used while anyone is sitting behind the wheel of a bus. So whether you're a maintenance person or you're a driver or you're fueling the vehicle, we have a restriction at this point that there are no personal electronic devices of any kind in use by the driver. And again, that's part of that partnership. We work together to make sure the policies that protect us and that that provide good service are in place. I work with budget and looking at how do we balance the resources that we have with the demand for service. We've been doing capital projects. We're in the middle of a bus purchase. We've kind of designed and worked on implementing a new CNG station that you've heard about earlier that we hope will be open this fall. We've been planning a maintenance facility that we have solicited funding for and now have initial design plans to be able to put into place. We do service planning. I do troubleshooting. Right now we have issues with our fare boxes, so between working with our contractor and their support corporate staff and getting very up close and personal with GFI, who is our manufacturer and parts provider, trying to troubleshoot and get parts delivered to us from Chicago. And then I coach the transit team. We are very much, Cindy and Silva and I, we're a very lean, mean, very flat organization. We all try to do a little bit of everything. And Silva, who is not here this evening, is in charge of most of our contract management and our data reporting. So she is collecting the data from MV and from Southland for our dial-a-ride, does a lot of the reporting to our outside agencies, and manages the contract as far as contract provisions and the companies meeting those contract requirements. And since Cindy is here, she has one of the most interesting jobs. I'm going to have her tell you a little bit about what she does.
Hello, good evening. My name's Cindy Butalia, and I'm the transit assistant for the transit section. I have many different duties and wear many different hats, but I coordinate basically all the field activities. So I do a lot of the ride checks on our Beeline and dial-a-ride systems. I do random and scheduled vehicle inspections. Look at driver vehicle inspection records, coordinating detours, issuing rider alerts, like the one for tonight. I also investigate bus stop and performance issues as far as benches, trash cans, shelters. I go out there on the field and go and look at it in person to see what we have there currently and what we can use to improve. And I collect a lot of bus stop data from that for our database for reporting and collection. I also oversee a lot of the Next Bus issues or just what's available to the public. If it has full functionality, accurate predictions, I am constant contact with Next Bus staff for that. And last but not least, I follow up on a lot of the complaints and concerns with the public. That's what I do in a nutshell.
I call Cindy our resident transit techie, because she's the only one that can seem to get all the stuff on her PDA for what time the next bus is coming. I'm still back in the old days of using my cell phone for calls and not for everything else. So Cindy's great, and at the point that you're interested in more about Next Bus, we can come back with a Next Bus presentation, show you live what's happening with the buses and how you can find out everything on your personal electronic device, which is not allowed on the bus if you're a driver, but you can have to tell you where your next bus is coming. Next, please. Besides our contracts with Southland and with MV, we have other partners that we work with on an ongoing basis. Cindy talked about Next Bus. which is our bus arrival prediction system that's available to us as a resource to monitor on-time performance, but also to the public to assess when their next bus will arrive. In the center, we have Moore & Associates. They operate a call center for us. So they're the ones that get the incoming calls and the incoming emails for Beeline and respond to those customer service requests. They also do what we call our mystery shopper. They do onboard stealth observations of the bus, whether it's on-time performance, how people are paying their fares, and thank you, John. Then a Transit Resource Center is our third-party consultant that does all of our bus inspections for us, and you'll see a slide a little bit later. They are doing inspections of our buses on the line during production, but they also do a quarterly safety inspection of both our Beeline fleet and our new Dollar Ride fleet. So they're out every year making sure that we are maintained very safely. And I mentioned GFI GenFare. They are one of the 2 fare box manufacturers here in the United States. They're located back east, and we have an Odyssey 7 fare box system, which is now out of date. So it's very difficult to get parts and to work with the system. So we're working with them to try and recycle parts from other agencies that may have that same model in place, and getting new or regenerated parts out of their warehouse back in Chicago. And GFI is now partnering with Cubic, who's the other manufacturer, for what we're calling a universal fare system fare box that we have grant funding to replace here in LA County. We're in line for that replacement. It'll probably be another year from now before everything's up and running. But the 2 manufacturers that were separate and competing have now joined together for LA County. And so we have one place to go now for our new fare boxes and our new equipment. So I spend a lot of time trying to put all the pieces together to make sure that what we have on the street still operates. I wanted to move and talk a little bit about how Beeline fits into transit here in LA County.
Before we jump to that,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I do have a question. I didn't hear you speak about transit security and who's in charge of that, and if you can answer that question.
I'll be happy to do that. Transit security is part of each operator's responsibility. MV does it for the Beeline. We have the city owns the buses, and we own the transit surveillance system that is on the buses. So we have internal video recording, both audio and video, that is recorded on each of the buses. It's managed by MV, so anytime we have an incident or something that triggers an incident, we capture that recording and maintain that for whether we need it for evidence or for future investigations. So that runs all the time. The other security piece that we have is we're radio equipped for each of the buses. So there's always a constant ability to communicate through dispatch. And that's why you have our buses are a safe place and part of the Salvation Army Safe Place program. Because anyone can get on the bus saying, I'm in trouble or I need help. And we have instant communication with both dispatch and then through either the Glendale Police or the sheriff's, depending upon which part of town that we're operating in.
Now there is, and I'm sure you're aware of it, stimulus money, specifically the Urban Area Security Initiative grants, which will even fund positions for the department. I don't know, Jano, if you know that. I keep seeing fire and police at those meetings, but I don't see anybody from transportation. City of LA, they do have such a position, and the person deals specifically with security issues. The transit system is considered a soft target, and money is available to enhance those. But I'm glad to hear that there is surveillance already on the buses. Thank you. You answered my question.
Thank you. So we're talking about transit in Los Angeles County. We're a fairly transit-rich environment. We operate in what we call 3 tiers. Metrolink and Metro Rail are considered Tier 1. They're the region-wide, heavy-duty, mostly rail operation. Tier 2 are what we call the 16 regional operators, or included in eligible operators in LA County. That's mostly because of their funding, and that they're, for all except Metro, of the 16 operators, have been in existence since the 20s and 30s for the most part. So they have a historic claim to transit in the area, and when state TDA funding was enacted, they were grandfathered in or included in that legislation for that state funding. And so they have a different role here in LA County. They have a reserve service area, so they don't serve on top of each other for the most part. And so in our area here in Glendale, Metro is our regional transit provider. And then the Tier 3 services are what we call the local transit systems. There are about 40 out of the 88 cities in LA County that operate their own little shuttle systems or some sort of fixed route transit. So examples would be Burbank, Glendale, and Pasadena, that we are local transit systems, mostly because we were created out of the Prop A local return and Prop C local return sales tax initiative here in the county, where the regional operators are long-standing. They receive federal and state dollars for their operations. We only receive LA County sales tax. Our relationship for the Tier 2 and Tier 3 operators with Access Services is that they are our complimentary ADA paratransit service. So if there's someone who is disabled or cannot use either the bus stops or the fixed route service here in Glendale, and they're going if they're going multiple jurisdictions or trying to get across town or to neighboring towns, Access Services would provide the complimentary paratransit services required by ADA. We're in a process right now of asking for some additional regional funding for the types of service that we do, and that is based on our volume of service that we provide here in Glendale right now. This chart shows the local transit systems, so talked about part of the 40 operators that receive Prop A and C local return funding. You'll see LA DOT. Obviously, the City of LA is much larger than the rest of us. City of LA Department of Transportation runs a community dash, and so you'll see their tall gray line is their service hours for community dash. If you look just to the left of that, the gray line at the bottom is Glendale, and you'll see Glendale outranks all of the other local transit systems. So we're kind of caught in this, we're bigger than everybody else, and we're kind of in the middle of those regional transit operators that receive other funding from state and federal sources. So we're in a process right now to see if we can request some additional funding and assistance, because we've kind of outgrown our resources that we have now. Next, please.
Hold on now, just a minute. The graph shows Glendale.
It shows Glendale, Pasadena, and Burbank together, because as together as a group, we're requesting some money.
All right.
But we want to show the size of our group in comparison to the rest of the county. And you'll see the same thing on the next slide. This shows our passengers that we carry. And again, the numbers aren't as important as just looking at the lines and saying Glendale's carrying a lot of people every day compared to a lot of the other local transit systems here in our area. And of course, you can see what a typical afternoon at Hoover High School looks like for us. The B line operates 7 routes, and we call them our regular routes. They're pretty much standard Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Some start a little earlier and some start a little bit later. We have more limited service on Saturday and then even further limited service on Sunday. But the routes 1 through 7 are really our core routes that haul the most people. Our routes 11 and 12 are the Metrolink Express service, and we say they operate just weekdays during peak. It's really to meet the morning trains and the afternoon trains at both the Glendale and the Burbank Metrolink stations. And then Route 13 is a flex shuttle. We actually use a dial-a-ride vehicle in dial-a-ride service to operate 5 trips per day up Glen Oaks Canyon to try and make the connection that used to be the route, Metro Route 201. We just completed our last fiscal year 08-09, and at this time of year we're reporting out all of our data and our costs for the year. So this is our almost audited operating cost for this year, so a little over $6 million. We were budgeted at $76 per hour for the budget, and we actually brought the costs in at $71.62, which gives us about between $2.50 and $3 for the cost per passenger, depending upon which route you're on and which trip is the longest. Our operating revenues for 08 or 09, you'll see primarily is Proposition A and C local return. And the local return is based on sales tax revenues back to the city, a local return portion that comes back to the city of Glendale. Our other sources of revenue are fare box And then the City of La Cañada and Metro purchase a little bit of transportation from us, and so those are the revenues for those purchase transportation agreements. And then we do a little bit of advertising on the outside of our buses currently, and that's about $35,000. So when you look at how we're funded, it's sales tax revenue and fares. Our fleet, we have 34 buses that are owned by the City of Glendale. One bus is owned by the City of La Cañada, and they give that to us to operate the La Cañada portion of service. We have 29 buses in peak service. That gives us 6 spares, but I have to tell you, because in one of the other slides, you'll see that one of those 6 spares doesn't really operate. It's a bus that's from 1981, so it's not on the street. We do not release that into service currently. So we really only have 5 buses that we can put into service, and it shows our spare ratio of 17%. That's really a low spare ratio when you think of your preventative maintenance and anything else that could go wrong that you're pulling a bus in off the street. Most of our vehicles are CNG. We still have 4 diesel vehicles that will be replaced, not in this current bus replacement, but in the next series of bus replacements scheduled for 2012. So here's our fleet today that we have, and every once in a while you'll hear complaints about our oldest buses. We have our Gilligs, which are the 4 diesel buses, are really, because they're diesel, they're real good workhorses. They're 40-foot buses. They don't die, of any of them, they will live the longer than anybody else, any of the others that we have. Our 1996 Bluebirds are probably our most problematic. They were really meant to be 7-year buses, and we've kept them in service now for 13 years. So they are due to be replaced, and will be replaced in what you're seeing as the 2010 replacement. That's fiscal year 2010 that we're in today. We have 9 buses on order, and then La Cañada is also buying a bus to replace their 1999 Bluebird. And we're thinking we're going to keep that 1999 Bluebird in our discussions with them and ask them to use that for the afternoon to help relieve some of the school overcrowding on Route 3. So hot off the press, because these came in last night about 9:30. This is the first bus that's in production with New Flyer. It's in Winnipeg currently, and you can see our body and part of the manufacturing crew is on the inside of the bus. So you're looking at the front of the bus on the lower right-hand side. So every week now, as the buses are in production, we get a production report that gives us every detail on, are there issues with welds, the materials that are being done, the quality of the electrical systems that are being put in. We actually have TRC representatives out at the factory in Winnipeg that are online as the buses are going through production to make sure that we have a quality bus build. So by the time that gets to us, anything that's gone wrong is only in transit as they drive the buses out here, and we're more assured that we have a quality bus from the inside out. Because by the time it gets here, you don't see any of the stuff that you see during this production period. For our fleet, I wanted to kind of show where we're using our buses and where the resources go. We have 29 buses, and you can see they're spread throughout all of the service. The route that takes the most buses, obviously, is Route 3. It's the longest route we have. It takes 8 buses, which includes our LCF buses and the LCF service that we provide for them. You'll see 5 buses for Route 1 and 2, and that's because Route 1 and 2 is interlined. And so that saves us a bus by doing that, that the buses can circulate through on both of the routes, and it's a little bit more economical and more efficient in offering the service. Our Route 13 bus is really a dial-a-ride vehicle and operated by Southland. So when we look at bus counts, when Dan talks about we save some buses, we can put buses back in, the bus for 13 really isn't a bus that we can recycle back in Beeline service. So looking ahead, we have a couple exciting things that we're working on. As I mentioned, we have a CNG station that is currently under construction, and we hope will be up and operable by the end of the year. That will save lots of commute time for our fueling, which we're now doing in Burbank, and on a bad day, we're doing it in the city of Los Angeles. We have $12.9 million of grant funding that's been secured for the Beeline Maintenance and Operations Facility. That is money that is in the bank. The last part is waiting the grant execution. And so we can move ahead with some of the other plans and approvals to begin to actually dig the holes and put the service in. It'll make a phenomenal difference between how we're operating now with a lease facility and to have a regular facility that fits all of our buses. We're not parking them on the street. So when we come back with that project, we can do more detail and show you kind of, here's normal, here's what we do. We don't have a bus wash, we have a bucket and a broom. So we're hoping to improve our ability, which means better, cleaner buses and better service for the customers. And then tonight, we're going to be talking about changes to the Beeline. We're looking at route improvements. Part of it is to control some costs because our sales tax revenue with the downturn in the economy has been reduced this last year. We came in about $700,000 less than what was originally anticipated. So that's a huge hit for us. And we're not looking at regaining some of those tax dollars back for the next couple of years. So we have to figure out how to size the system within the resources that we have. We have some issues with overcrowding. You'll see a typical bus on an afternoon on some of our routes. We need to figure out how we can revamp some of the service to put more buses, more hours where we need to relieve the overcrowding. And then we're looking at increasing productivity. We have some parts of lines that aren't very productive and others where we're bursting out of the seams. So trying to balance that a little bit better. And then because of the economy and the increasing costs for fuel and everything else in our service, we're looking at a fare increase to help offset those operating costs. And Dan's going to walk us through the whole fare analysis that goes kind of hand in hand with our routes and the changes we're recommending for the routes. So with that, are there any questions before I introduce Dan? Because that just leads us into the next piece.
I have a quick question, if you may. Route 5 and 7, I would assume during the weekend it's practically not used. And I don't know how many buses they go to doing on Saturdays, but I would expect during the week it will be crowded.
That is very accurate.
Okay, but you show us a line where the fleet information where it talks about the bus assignment and bus per route.
That is currently today with the service, with the schedules and the service we have out in street today. That's how the buses are currently assigned.
Would that also encompass during the weekend or just during the week?
Yeah, that would be during the week our peak service.
I see.
So that's the most buses out on the street at any one given time, and it would be a weekday service.
Just for curiosity, during the week, how many buses for Route 5 and 7?
On a weekend?
No,
Oh, during the week?
Monday to Friday.
Monday through Friday, it's
2 and 3.
2 and 3.
Yeah, two on Route 5 and 3 on Route 7. So that's the one that's listed on your slide.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
And we'll talk about specifically some of the buses and what changes that would be when Dan does his presentation.
You just made a comment about a $700,000 loss in sales tax revenues. Is that, you show here $5.2 million for the operating costs. Is that before the cut of $700,000 or is that net of the costs? In other words, you're expecting $6 million basically, but you only got 5.2?
Actually, we're spending our reserves from prior years. We have some Prop A and C that we've set aside either as capital match or as operating reserve. Over the last couple of years, we've been dipping into that a little bit to make the ends meet. So the number that's shown in there is actually what we have used out of that fund this year.
Can you tell me what the real split is, what you actually received in the Prop A and C versus what you spent out of reserves? Do you know what that split is?
I don't know that accurately here. I didn't bring that data with me, but I can give
Okay.
that to you specifically, what our revenues are and then what our actual expenses for
Yeah, I'd
both
like
of
to
those
know that
funds.
as well as what the status of the reserve fund is.
Okay, be happy to do that. Okay, with that, any other questions on general Beeline questions?
Just a quick question regarding the grant funding you mentioned for the maintenance and operations facility. Is that, are there strings attached to that you can only use it for that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Each we have 3 pieces of funding that came in. It's all federal capital transit funds. They're awarded to us specifically for construction of the Beeline facility. So if we were to turn it back in, we can't swap it for anything else. That's what it is. And if we turn it back in, actually the region loses it. Already in an executed grant.
Any questions?
That's it for now.
With that,
Thank
we'll
you.
segue to the introduction for Dan, Part 2. Dan is great. He originally hails from New York. He was born in Manhattan, lived in the Bronx, so he knows what a real transit system looks like and how it operates. And we were sharing stories earlier. We both grew up as kids riding transit, and I think that's where we got our addiction to public transit systems. Dan earned a BA in urban sociology and a master's degree in regional planning from Cornell University. He is a smart guy, and we are very lucky to have him working with us on this project. Dan worked for the New York State Department of Transportation and also for the New York Transit Authority. He then headed south to Florida. I don't know, he went down for a winter and didn't come back. But he worked for Qatar, which is the Center for Urban Transportation Research. It's at the University of South Florida. It is a huge think tank for transit, well known throughout the United States. He decided he wanted to try the West Coast, so in 1995 he came out and worked for transportation management and design, which is how I first knew him at one of our former transit properties, and worked with him on a number of regional studies here in LA County. He had done some early work with transportation management design here with Glendale before I came, and now he has his own firm, Dan Boyle and Associates. Dan's really, that's why I say we are really, really lucky, because he's a great guy and also really knows the transit stuff, and by the time we're done tonight you may be overloaded on all the data, but he's got a great sense about how to make all that data come together and work together. He's nationally recognized. He's one of the Transportation Research Board's I said select few that works with the FTA to do a lot of research nationwide. He has just finished a new scheduling manual. I'll tell you what, this is the old scheduling manual that I have from 1998. There is a new one that Dan, it was his project with the Transit Research Board to redo a new scheduling manual that will be used now across the United States for anybody like us that like all the details in the transit planning. So I am very pleased to introduce to you Dan Boyle. And he can answer, he says he can't, but he can answer any question you ask him about transit and our Beeline system.
Thanks, Catherine. Mr. Chair and Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to come here and share the line-by-line analysis with you. I'm scared to get up after that introduction, but I think everything will go fine. The presentation will be really in three parts. We'll first examine the existing Beeline system. We did a lot of work on the line-by-line that we'll talk about to see what exactly is out there today, how it's working, and how it might be improved. The second part is proposing adjustments to existing routes, which might involve some reallocation of resources from a lightly used route to a heavily used route. And then finally, we'll discuss some other options that were presented during the course of the study, either that came out of the mobility study or out of community requests for service. So those will be the three basic portions of my presentation tonight. The purpose of the line-by-line analysis, Metro actually requires all of its systems to do one every 3 years. It's a snapshot of a particular point in time. We went out in November with we had 2 checkers on every bus to count passengers and see how they pay their fares. We also counted minutes along the route, checked the travel times to see how the bus was running compared to schedule, if the running times were appropriate. We looked at how people paid their fare. We did an onboard survey that asked passengers about where they're going, where they're coming from, and many demographics about it, and also their opinions of the service. So we'll talk some about that as well. It was an intensive data collection, and NB helped us a lot to make sure the checkers were on the right buses. We spent early November 2008 doing that for a period of about 2 weeks. We counted and surveyed on weekends and weekdays. We tried to avoid Mondays and Fridays because they're not typical days, but it was an intensive effort. And finally, the whole purpose of taking this data into account is to see what's working and what can be improved. So that'll be the focus of the recommendations. During the course of the evening, we'll talk about the propensity to use transit, the RTOI, that stands for Residential Transit Orientation Index. Catherine mentioned my work in Florida, where we were struggling with trying to identify areas of a city that were more likely to use transit. So we take a number of variables, and they can include percentage of low-income persons, percentage of households without vehicles, residential density, percentage of youth, percentage of elderly living in a particular neighborhood in a census block group in the technical term. And we look to see where the areas that the transit would seem to be used most intensively are. Those are in the dark blue, and you see that they're all down in the city of Glendale for the most part, right in the heart of the city. The light blue is the next level down, a high transit orientation, and you see those, again, mostly concentrated within the core of the city. And then medium transit orientation in yellow and the low transit orientation in pale yellow. That gives us a sense of where people live who are likely to use transit from previous studies that we know. We've tried this in a number of places, and it seems to really correlate well with ridership. So it's not a statistical method of if you're in a high transit orientation, you're going to get X number of riders, but it tells us where the people live who are most likely to use transit. So I explain that to you here because it does show up on many of the maps as we go forward. This is the Beeline network in the broader Glendale area, including La Cañada Flintridge. You can see Route 3 goes up to La Cañada Flintridge. I have a pointer so I can play with this, up to the JPL, along Foothill, and then comes down. Most of the routes are within the detailed area. So these are the Beeline routes. The next map shows the overlay of MTA routes and also LADOT, and there's one Pasadena route that comes up to JPL. You can see there's a lot of service. This is really a transit-rich area. Now we look at detail, taking out La Cañada Flintridge and focusing in on downtown and the surrounding neighborhoods. Again, you see a pretty broad coverage. Certainly, I started working up here in the mid to late 90s when there were 3 routes running, and there's been a lot of additions since then that are very well used. And then again, we put the MTA routes on top of this in pink. You can see that it really is a transit-rich environment where people have a lot of transit choices. There are a lot of services to choose from. Some statistics on the Beeline. These are from our counts that we did. Weekday ridership, just over 13,000 altogether. Productivity. We measure productivity by the number of boardings per revenue hour of service. And the revenue hours when a bus is actually out there in service, boarding and alighting passengers. The overall productivity is 40.9 passengers per revenue hour. That's a really good number, especially for a system like this. As a comparison point, maybe Orange County has a deal to contract out some of their low-performing routes to a private contractor, and their break point is 10 passengers per revenue hour. So there's a number of routes in a more suburban area, granted, but 40.9 boardings per revenue hour overall is a very good productivity. It shows that the system is being used and it is working. There are people on the buses. Cost per passenger, and again, we have weekday, Saturday, and Sunday up here. You can see the weekday does better in all the measures. Saturday a little worse, and Sunday again a little lower, except for schedule adherence. Schedule adherence is now 73.8% might look a little low, but that is actually when you go out to every time point and have people on the bus recording when the bus is there. That's actually a pretty good number. Usually if you do it that way, you see 60 to 70% of transit systems across the country. So 73.8% for the weekday. We do have some ideas on improving that. And a little higher on Saturday, more the highest on Sunday when there's less traffic. So these are some of the overall statistics we gathered from our counts for the Beeline. The weekday statistics by time of day, the ridership all day, you see again these numbers from the last slide. The AM peak we define as the beginning of service to 9 a.m., midday is 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., and the PM peak is 3 p.m. until we're done at around 7. The productivity remains remarkably stable throughout the day. you don't have the peaks that you see in some other systems. Partially, the midday numbers are inflated. Some of the school trips are in the very end of the midday. But in general, there's a very even productivity throughout the day, which is good because that's when, if we have to put out a lot of buses just for the morning and afternoon, it's less effective. Just having that demand reasonably constant throughout the day really helps us to operate the system as well as we can. We do have some overcrowding, and we define that as loads that exceed 125% of the seated capacity. Now, the seated capacity will differ by the type of buses we have out there. The smallest bus seats 27. The larger buses, which are the old 40-foot diesel buses, seat 45. We identified 36 instances of overcrowding on 5 routes through the ride check, and most of these were clearly related to school bell times, particularly in the afternoon. Some in the morning, but especially in the afternoon. The kids get out and they're on the bus. And some of the pictures you saw before of Hoover High and Lafayette High School also has some overcrowding issues. So we will propose later on, we'll talk about some strategies that we might be able to address some of these overcrowding. Obviously, we'd love to have more buses and more money, but the approach we took generally was we weren't constrained by any particular, we have to meet a certain cost at the beginning of the study. We just went ahead and did what we thought was the best way to use the buses we have. And so you'll see we do have some recommendations on addressing some of these overcrowding situations that will be cost neutral, basically. This shows the weekday ridership by route, and Route 3 is the heaviest with almost 4,000 boardings a day. That's followed by Route 4, which serves Chevy Chase and then comes back into downtown, serves some very transit-oriented neighborhoods, and actually carries over 2,500 passengers per weekday. Route 7, which also goes to the college from the west side of the city, is a little over 1,500. Routes 1 and 2 along Brand and Central, when I first came to Glendale, I thought those would be the major routes in terms of ridership because that's the signature street and that's the downtown. They carry well, but they don't carry as well as some of the other routes. If you put them together, you'd be around 2,100. That would put them third, but routes 3 and 4 actually do carry more people, and there's a fair number of resources, revenue hours put into routes 1 and 2. So it's just a little something to keep in mind. I certainly think of Brand and it is an important street, but the ridership on routes 1 and 2 really don't match some of the other routes, and I was surprised by that when I first came here. You see routes 11 and 12 are the Metrolink shuttles, and they operate in the peak only, so obviously the ridership is lower, and route 13 had very low ridership with just 5 trips out to the canyon. This was a slide we talked about transit orientation already, so we can skip past here. Get into the onboard survey and some of the things we found from riders. We asked them what they're doing on the bus, where are they going, why are they riding, and you see that work, the light blue piece of the pie over here, and the yellow piece, school, together account for about 2/3 of the ridership. And this was over 2,800 surveys returned on the buses. And this is not unusual for transit systems. Most people are actually using it to get to work or to school. Shopping was about 13%, visiting and personal 6%, medical 5%, and other 12%. Some of the other are people who are going home and misunderstood the question. Oh, I'm going home. Well, we wanted to tell them where they were coming from, and there are some other purposes too that weren't included in this. But the major point here, most of the riders are using the system to get to work or to school. Almost 2/3 of all the Beeline riders. And sometimes in community systems you don't anticipate that, but it certainly is true in the case of Glendale. Most people are using it because they have to get somewhere, either work or school, and they're relying on the Beeline to get them there. This was really interesting, the age of the riders, because in the number of places I've done surveys like this, I've never seen quite so even a distribution. There's no one piece of the pie that really stands out here. The biggest piece is the 18 to 24s, and a lot of that, I think, is driven by Glendale Community College. That's about 20% of your riders. But you have a number of riders 17 and under going to the high schools and middle schools. You have a number of riders in each of these working ages, and you have 8% of your riders who are 65 and older. Again, I usually don't see this. When I saw this slide, this pie chart, I said, wow, this is really interesting, because in most places I work, you don't have that distribution of ages. Clearly, people of all ages within Glendale are using the Beeline system. And this is asked about the number of vehicles they have in the household. Typically, we see the zero-vehicle households as being the largest piece. Here, it's over a third, but actually that means two-thirds of your riders do have one or more vehicles available. Now, if you have one vehicle available and both if it's a couple and both parties are working, obviously somebody is kind of effectively without a vehicle during the day. But again, this is a more even distribution than we see sometimes. So those are some of the interesting demographics from the survey. We asked them to rate your various elements of service on a 1 to 4 scale. And these are really high ratings. The overall rating was average 3.32. The highest rated element was safety while on the bus, followed by safety at bus stops. That was nice to see. Operator courtesy as well. We asked for a lot of people will complain about certain operators, but by and large, people are very happy with the folks. There was some people here we were talking to before the meeting who commented on, it's almost like a family. You know your operator. And so that was a good sign. The lowest rated, schedules are readily available and no need to transfer. There is a need to transfer on the Beeline. And that's kind of unavoidable as you get into providing transit for a large number of people. You have to operate it as efficiently as you can. But that overall number of 3.32 on a scale of 1 to 4 was very impressive. I think that people who use the Beeline are very happy with the service and really value what it offers. Let me talk about fares for a little bit. This summarizes the current local fares. If you pay cash, you pay 25 cents for an adult, 15 cents if you're senior or have persons with disabilities. You can purchase a 31-day pass, $12 for adult for 31 days of ridership. It's validated the first day you board, $4.50 for senior and disabled. You can also get a 10-trip card for $2. Interagency transfers are 50 cents for adult to transfer to another system such as Metro, 25 cents for senior and disabled. The Beeline accepts Metro, Metrolink, and Easy Transit passes. We get reimbursed for Metrolink and Easy Transit. We do not get reimbursed for Metro passes. The interesting thing is there's been no change in the fares since 1993. That's the last 16 years we've operated at the same fare levels. When you look at the fare box revenue and take it as a percentage of operating cost, it comes out to 4.6%. And again, as a baseline comparison, if you were an included operator, one of the included operators Catherine talked about, Metro requires you have a 20% fare box recovery. So this is low, as expected from a 25-cent fare, and it raises the issue of whether passengers are actually paying a fair fare. Are they paying their appropriate share of the cost of running the service? Almost all riders I've ever met think that their fare actually covers all the cost of the service, no matter what the fare is, and this is just a reminder that less than 5% of the cost of operating the Beeline come from the fare box. So the recommendations we've developed is a phased fare increase. Go up first to 50 cents, then to 75 cents, and then $1. I think we would recommend that this be approved as a package and not be approved in each individual step. See similar increases in other fare media. We did do a peer analysis that's in the report of other fare systems that are like Glendale. That was mostly systems in the Los Angeles area, metro systems. And we recommended discontinuing the acceptance of Metro passes because you don't get reimbursement from Metro. Many other systems do not accept Metro passes. And also, most systems don't have both a 10-trip card and a 31-day pass. They have one or the other. It's a little bit complex administratively to produce both, and that's why most systems choose one. So we recommended that you keep the 31-day pass but discontinue the 10-trip card just to simplify administrative costs. You're still giving people a very good option to purchase a prepaid fare media that gives them a really good deal, but you're again minimizing your administrative costs. So this is kind of the point at which we're done with the first part of the presentation, summarizing how Beeline is working now, and I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any right now.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for presenting this. Since we have this slide on the board, is the 50 cents across the board, including the senior and...
No, the senior and disabled would still be half price. They'd still be 25 cents. Yeah. 50 cents and 25 cents. We'd look at 75 cents and 35 cents, and then $1.50. So the senior would be the lowest half of the fare rounded to the lowest nearest nickel.
Okay. And one more question. You show a slide on Route 13. Based on the package that we have here, how do we justify that cost per passengers? One of the edges, the highest, is $5.68.
I will get into that in the recommendation phase.
Okay.
I have trouble justifying that as well, but we will talk about that in recommendations.
Question regarding the way you did your ride check. I know the Beeline buses have bicycle carriers up front. As part of your ride check data gathering, did you make any note about usage of those?
We did not count that would have been a great thing to count, but we had two people on the buses to look at what fare they were paying too. With this many fare media choices, we really felt we had a second person to do that, and they'd also watch the back door when crowds were getting off. So we tried to. It would be a nice thing to have counted, but we always try to make it as simple as possible for the people who get on the bus. So we don't have any information on that.
Mr. Welch.
On the slide before this one, you talked about 4.6% is the fare box recovery, but in this other slide we got earlier, it said 6.2%. So can you clarify, please?
Two things. One, we used the budgeted operating cost because when we prepared this report, we weren't yet done with the fiscal year, and the budgeted cost was actually slightly higher than the actual operating cost. That was one thing. The second thing is when we do a count on the buses, we always count more passengers than the fare box shows getting on. It can be the equipment, it can be the operator forgetting to punch in. 95% of the operators do it perfectly, but if 5% don't, it affects your total. So we always find slightly higher ridership, and we did use a slightly higher cost because we didn't have the final numbers for that year, so we used the budgeted cost.
And can you talk about, because I didn't really read anything in here about the tap card system that Metro uses. I mean, I know they're converting everything over to the tap card system, but I didn't hear anything about that in here. So,
when we trained the checkers at MV's facility, we had an example of all of the fare media they might possibly see, and it included the tap card. Because we're not set up right now to accept the tap card, we don't have the fare boxes to do it, it's just used as a flash pass, basically. So we counted that as a Metro pass if people got on with a tap card. So that was, the checkers were aware of that. But, because it is not, you don't have the fare boxes to use the tap card now, but people can board with it, we treated that the same as a Metro Pass, something that people would flash and get on with.
But in the future, your recommendation is to discontinue that?
Discontinue, well, the tap card, presumably we'd have a little bit of revenue coming toward us. We get credit for that. Right now with the Metro Passes, we do not get any reimbursement for people who board with the Metro Pass. The tap card can almost be seen as replacing the Easy Transit Pass, which Metro does reimburse us for. So, everyone will be having a discussion with Metro, and Catherine...
I see Catherine wants to get into this one, so...
I'll help Dan out on this one. I mentioned earlier that we're in line for what we call a UFS, Universal Fare System fare box, and that is based on using the same tap card between all of the different operators here in LA counties. We're trying to do that seamless writing process. Currently, what they call the tap card is it's like a credit card, and you load your passes or your fare media onto that card. Thank you, Nestor. Nestor, who does our training. This is what a tap card looks like. You could use it to ride, at some point you'd be able to use it to ride the Beeline, Culver City, Metro Rail, the Metro Bus. Currently, the tap cards that are being sold by Metro only have the Metro passes on it. So you have a weekly pass, bi-weekly pass, or a monthly pass, but they don't work on anybody else's fare box except for Metro's. So if you had one of these in Glendale, you could tap your Metro bus and it would recognize you have a valid fare. But on the Beeline fare boxes we have now, even though it has like a little target on it, there's no tap function, so it can't tell whether or not you actually have anything loaded on this card, or that it's a Metro Pass or an Easy Transit Pass. At some point, we'll try and get Easy Transit Pass loaded, which means you could ride any bus system that's part of that Easy Transit Pass program. The reason that Glendale is waiting to install these new tap fare boxes is there's no clearinghouse set up for the revenue that's collected. So if Metro sells the pass, they keep the money. If someone with a Metro Pass were to ride Glendale, there's no process to give us our quarter, or 50 cents or 75 cents.
So clearly, this is something that we have to work out as an interagency thing.
As a whole
Okay.
county-wide process. So right now, the only UFS systems are Metro, which is operating their own pass. Culver City is using the TAP card and putting a Culver City pass on it, but you have to buy that at Culver City to use it on Culver City. You can't use it on Metro. So we're not at the point to install on Glendale yet because we have so much Metro and Beeline service on top of, running next to each other and transferring between. A passenger would be really confused saying, well, it says tap on your fare box, but I can't actually make it work yet. So we want to alleviate as much confusion and wait until everything's up and running and then put those fare boxes on our buses. But the goal is, in LA County, sometime during my lifetime, you could use one instrument to ride any transit system here in LA County.
And hopefully sooner than that, because Metro is moving full bore ahead with it. Advisedly or not, they're doing it. So
we're hoping that all the glitches get worked out before we are implementing it here in Glendale.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Not at this time.
I have a quick question to them. On earlier slides, you showed us some MTA overlay over the Beeline. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us which one are those and how many of them do we have? Which route where there's some? Because it was hard to see.
Yeah, it is hard to see on that map.
Just give me the numbers.
Certainly on Brand, you both operate. You also operate on Glen Oaks in the west part of the city.
But which route is
Beeline's
that?
Route 7 and Metro's 92.
So 7 and 92?
And what's on Brand now? Is it the 92 as well? 92 on Brand. Yeah, it turns onto Brand. And that overlaps your 1 and 2. Metro used to have a rapid bus along there, and they moved that to San Fernando Road, the 794. So,
And there was another one over the 134 freeway next to Glendale College.
LADOT operates an express bus between Burbank and Pasadena via the 134. It gets off at Brand and makes a stop there. And I think there's another LADOT bus has a stop. Yeah.
So how many do we have total?
I
Approximately.
can think of 3 major segments where there is overlap. We did consider that and look at that, particularly for Route 7. I'll talk about that a little bit when I get there. There's some cases where it appears duplicative. I don't think in terms of Brand, you're hitting different markets. You're having people come out of the area to come to Brand and shop or whatever versus people getting around the city, within the city. So there's a slightly different market for those services. The college, there is some overlap getting there, but the routes come from different places, so they're bringing different areas to have access to GCC.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say there's probably 3 major segments, portions of a route that have overlap. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a good question because that is something we considered when we were looking at potential new routes.
Right, that's what I was
and
thinking,
We'll
yeah.
get to that.
And one of the issues we have in Glendale regarding overlap is if you want to get from the north part of the city to the south part, there are only 3 ways of doing it. Verdugo, Kenyatta, or the Glendale Freeway. Or helicopter, I guess, is a 4th way. But you're inevitably going to have overlap on those
Yes.
routes because they're the only ones that are available.
Yep. That's a good point. Thank you.
How do we proceed now?
Okay.
Next part 2, I would say.
Moving to part 2. This is the recommendations by route that we'll go through. We'll start with routes 1 and 2 along Brandon Central. Our proposal is to, there's been a lot of talk about the buzz, the concept about a buzz on Brand and have very frequent service and branded service. We get to the frequency here. We're proposing 15-minute service on Brand and make that Route 1. Right now, Route 1 and Route 2, one goes up Central, down Brand, the other goes up Brand, down Central. So make Route 1 Brand and put it at every 15 minutes. Route 2 on Central, instead of going all the way up to Stocker, we'd cut it at Doran and turn it around, and we'd run Route 2 on Central every 30 minutes. Right now, both streets get 20-minute service. If we continue the interline, Catherine mentioned that they're both interlined for scheduling purposes. We can do this with the same number of buses during the week. We need an extra bus on Saturday and Sunday to do it because it doesn't operate as frequently on Saturday and Sunday now. But this gets at the frequency we need for the buzz without doing the branding, because we'd still have the buses on Central and on brand. The next shows a map of Route 1. It would operate basically as it does now. It would turn around up at Stocker and then come back to brand to come down brand. And Route 2 is the next slide. That would be the Central bus. It would turn around at Doran and then come back on Central. This would be every 30 minutes, whereas the previous brand bus would be every 15 minutes. It was an attempt to acknowledge that idea of the buzz and try to get more frequent service on brand, which is the signature corridor in Glendale. Be telling you that, don't I? But boost up the service there. The buzz concept was 15 minutes, and still do it in a very operationally efficient manner.
Where was Brand again? Can you show me Brand quickly?
Can you go back to that? Yeah, this is basically all the service that Brand has now. It goes up as far as Stocker, and then it comes back down Central. He would continue to bring it up to Stocker, and then cut back over along Glen Oaks and come back down Brand. So right now it can be a little confusing. I think riders generally get the fact that if you go north on Brand, you take Route 2. If you go north on Central, you take Route 1. But we'd make Route 1 the Brand route and Route 2 the Central route. We'd run more frequency on Brand and less frequency on Central, and we could do it for essentially the same amount of money we spend now. A little bit of an increase because Saturday and Sunday service would be increased. We'd need an extra bus for that.
Is the turnaround around residential neighborhood, or is that the current one we have?
I think we run on every one of the streets doing this turnaround. I think there's a bus on Glen Oaks. Yeah,
I'm just concerned about the residential neighborhood or the turnaround.
I don't think
That's not-
I don't think this would affect anybody. Nobody's having service on Route 1 that does not have service.
Sean, keep in mind also there is ridership there. So, if we
Okay.
were not to go there, then you will be removing those riders who need to get to the bus, and they would have to walk a long block to the next block. So it's multifamily residential in the upper Brand still, and so I think that's a good location to keep the buses, and we've never had any problems with it.
Okay.
And we do see boardings right at Stocker now, the northernmost piece. I think people from the north sometimes come down to get on there, so there is some demand up to that far. That's why we wanted to keep it up. At least Route 1 go as far as Stocker. Okay. Route 3 was a challenge. I'll walk through these.
Before we move on, are we going to talk about these and ask questions line by line, or do we want to wait until we get to the end?
It's up to you, commissioners. If you wish to just go on each route and ask questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Whatever you
I
feel.
think, in my opinion, unless the commission... fellow
We're
commission-
okay. Dan is okay with
absolutely.
either way. We can ask
I
questions.
think it
answer
would be
right
better
away.
to ask each one at a time, because
Okay, because I do have some comments and questions about the lines 1 and 2 thing, so.
Mr. Chair, I'm also assuming there's some speakers that want to speak on some of the items. So we need to consider that.
I have 2 speaker cards. I think we're going to have an hour break, and right after the break, if we can, I will call them up and see if they have any questions. But go ahead, Mr.
Okay. I wanted to ask, particularly along lines 1 and 2, about the focus on having it serve the GTC on both lines 1 and 2, as well as the Express Line 11. It just seems that there seems to be a lot of emphasis on the GTC, but looking at the boardings and the lightings, it does not seem that it's maybe justified to have all 3 lines serving the GTC.
That's a good point. It's really operationally the best way to turn the routes around in that area of town. That's why we didn't change that.
Drilling on the other side.
So really, that's an operational issue. That's the best anchor in the southern part of the city to do that, to put it in.
The concern I would have would be on Route 2 serving Glendale, because you're cutting it from now headways of about 20 minutes to up to 30 minutes. So, I mean, Brand is good the way that you got it set up, but if you're cutting it, extending the headway so much, I would think that it might be useful to perhaps look at shortening that route, and maybe just going as far as Los Feliz in Central, and doing a turnaround at a different place to try and get that headway down, maybe down to 20 minutes again.
That would not get us down to 20.
It would not.
So there really was, operationally, there was no good place I could find to turn that around short of the GTC, and the fact that we save a bus by interlining those two at the GTC argued that we should have both of them there.
Okay.
It's kind of a sad but true statement. You're right that it doesn't generate a lot of ridership, but it is a convenient point operationally.
Also, it's a layover place for the drivers where they take breaks, so it's a convenient place to do so.
Another good point. A lot of times when you put a new route in, the hardest thing is to find out where to lay over the bus, because you don't want it out on the street where it's going to block traffic and try to find a place for it. So that is another advantage of TTC.
Okay.
Okay, next.
Okay, we'll go to Route 3. Most of the ridership on Route 3 is focused between downtown and the college. So we're proposing to do a short turn, basically, operate every other trip as far as the college, and only alternate trips would then go up to JPL. So if you were downtown, you'd get a bus on the hour that would go to the college, and then at the 20 after it would go to JPL. It would serve the college on the way, of course. So only alternate trips would go all the way up to La Cañada Flintridge, would go past the college. And again, we do this because the productivity is so high at that piece. We carry 76 boardings per revenue hour between downtown and the college. The other segments north of there have about 29 boardings per revenue hour. So there's a big disparity in usage there. The biggest chunk of this route in terms of our ridership and certainly our productivity is between downtown and the college. And we're really running trips up to JPL that we don't need to be running from the productivity numbers. La Cañada Flintridge, as Catherine mentioned, pays for Glendale to operate a shuttle there. Right now, it's not scheduled very well. It's a challenge to schedule it because of the cycle times, but sometimes that shuttle bus is right on top of a Route 3 bus. So we looked at ways that we think we can provide a true 20-minute headway along Foothill Boulevard by scheduling that La Cañada shuttle bus to go in between the long 3 buses. So La Cañada Flintridge would see essentially probably a better service than they see now, a more reliable service. We still have to talk with La Cañada. They have not had time to talk to us yet and review this, but that's our proposal for them. Overcrowding is a problem in the afternoon, so we want to add an afternoon trip to reduce the overcrowding. The way we're proposing to do this, you'll see some proposals later to cut some early afternoon trips on the Metrolink shuttles that are very lightly used, that we really don't need. And the idea is to pull one of those Metrolink shuttle buses out early on another route and have it help out where we need the help to reduce overcrowding, and then it gets back to downtown and it can go on and do the rest of the Route 11 or Route 12. This is a technique I wish I could say I invented, but many other systems use it. If they have express buses, they'll pull it out a little earlier and have it help with a school trip where there's overcrowding, and then it can resume its express service. We're also talking about the La Cañada Flintridge Express. They run it from a parking lot to the high school and JPL in the morning. It carries very few people, so we're proposing they take that those service hours and put them in the afternoon to help out with the high school loadings, which are extensive. It appears that everybody in La Cañada, well, not everybody, but most people in La Cañada drive their kids to school in the morning because there's very little off activity at the school in the morning. And then in the afternoon is when they use the bus to get home. So we suggested they move those service hours to the afternoon. Again, we haven't talked with them yet about it. The next slide shows a little bit what this will look like. Right now, Route 3 from downtown up to the college. And then on the weekends, on Saturday, it only goes to Honolulu and La Crescenta, the funky line here is the weekday-only service up in La Cañada Flintridge. So we're proposing that half of the buses operate between just downtown and Glendale Community College, and then the long trips continue to go up. We add some service and rationalize the schedule so that there's a true 20-minute headway along Foothill and La Cañada, and you wind up with 40-minute headways north of the college as far as Foothill and Castle, which is where the LCF shuttle begins. This proposal really focuses the service where it's most used, and it would also save us 2 buses. Right now, 8 buses are on the route, and we could operate under this scheme with 6 buses. So this is the reason we propose this. That's the Route 3 proposal. If anybody has any questions about that, sure.
Good question. It's good that you break it down for weekdays and weekend. Would the weekends will be the same routes up to La Cañada too?
No, the weekend we'd still continue to stop at Honolulu and La Crescenta. La Cañada Flintridge has not asked and has not offered any money to operate weekend service up there. And because the school is such a focus of the La Cañada Flintridge service, you get some other ridership along Foothill, but really it's the high school. JPL to an extent, but a lot of the JPL activity is transferring to the old Route 177, which still operates down to Pasadena, and the transfer point is at the JPL. So we do see ridership at the JPL. Some of that, at least, is transfer activity, people going on to Pasadena. When we look at, we take a Foothill and Castle or the city line, which is actually one stop west of there, we see about 300 passengers riding through in each direction. To La Cañada Flintridge or from La Cañada Flintridge continuing on, and that's out of a total of close to 5,000 riders a day on the Route 3. So, La Cañada Flintridge is happy with what they have, and we think we're rationalizing it to an extent that it'll be their shuttles will be a little more full. They're kind of empty now, and moving the morning piece to the afternoon will help with the school overcrowding. So we think they'll react favorably, but we haven't talked to them yet.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to add to this suggestion or recommendation is that the Glendale Community College, as you may all know, has a very difficult time with parking. I mean, we have a joint parking authority with the college, and the city parking lots are being used. Last year, the college built a new parking structure, and that is full already, and the college enrollment has gone up. So without the Glendale Route 3 serving the college, they would almost have to build probably 2 more parking structures. So it's very critical that we address this issue as far as the frequency, because we serve the college from downtown area, and many students are using it. So that's why the real focus is there is no enough parking on the campus, and students rely heavily on the Beeline to get to and from the college.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Walsh.
I like the recommendation. I think it will work very well, but my only concern would be confusion with the public. Is that some Route 3s go to the college and some Route 3s go beyond? Did you consider maybe giving it a new route number for the shortened trip?
Yeah, we called it 3A in the report just for purposes. I don't think we'd want to call it that in real life. Maybe we would, but to have some other number it differently. That was one of Catherine's points to me. Don't just make it a short turn, but have it a different number so people understand. Okay, this bus, if it's 3A, goes only to the college. If you want to go beyond, you wait for Route 3. That's a good point, because it can be very confusing to operate short turns. You always wind up people saying, "Well, why are you stopping here?"
Right.
So.
Thanks.
Anything else on Route 3?
So, Mr. Weissman?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time in the presentation to bring this up or not, but because these issues have to do with Route 3, though they may be more issues in general. Where I live up in the La Crescenta area of the city of Glendale is completely unserved by Beeline, and it also happens to be one of those pale yellow areas, which is, low RTOI. And I kind of want to take a step back and maybe have some conversation. I guess in a way it's a chicken and egg problem. I mean, Are people not using transit because none is being provided? If it were being provided, would they use it? It's a kind of a problem for me personally because I do try to take the number 3 Beeline bus when I, a lot of times during the month when I come to downtown Glendale. In order to get there, I have to drive to La Crescenta and Mary, which is about 2 miles from my house. And, you know, the other issue that I've heard, especially with transit along Foothill Boulevard, is it's already served by Metro, by the 90 and 91 lines, which also go down Glendale Boulevard and overlap to additional parts of the Route 3 route there. But I just kind of find myself wondering, are we in far north Glendale going to be forever denied having, you know, public transit through the Beeline because of these factors? Do you think that's...
You know, that's a fair question because, I mean, I approach this transit business from a productivity standpoint and from a, you know, transit orientation standpoint, trying to be as effective and efficient as I can. But I recognize that there are equity issues as well in terms of different parts of the city, and far north Glendale is certainly one that can legitimately claim to not being served by the Beeline. You do have MTA service there, routes 90 and 91, as you mentioned. In one of our, as we get into the third part of the recommendation, talking about new routes, it's not recommended for now, but we did come up with a concept of a Foothill Boulevard type of service that would go to the western portion of the city and serve areas that are not served and come down to La Cañada Flintridge, possibly continue to Pasadena to the Gold Line. We don't have the funding for that now, but in terms of longer range things, that was one thing that we did look at, because Foothill there's no continuous service along Foothill. You know, you either have the metro routes in the western part of the route or Route 3 and the La Cañada Flintridge shuttle on the eastern part. And it is a major corridor. You know, I don't think it would ever attract ridership like we see in other parts of the city, but there may be a way to serve that effectively.
Okay, and I guess maybe if we're having a joint study session with the City Council, that would be an appropriate venue to bring that up.
Commissioner Weissman, I think at the end of this presentation, I'd like to ask Dan to just basically, if we're saving any buses by making some of these changes, we're basically putting it back in areas that is most needed. So really looking at productivity, we already have a problem there, and we would like to address it within the resources that we have. But that doesn't preclude that we have other areas of the city, as you said, that if we build it, they will come. Or if we provide the service, that people will use. Now, at what level, we won't know until we actually put the service out there. So at the end of the presentation, there are areas that we said there are new service areas, and it's always been part of our presentations or our studies. But we would like to at least address them and say there is a potential demand there. If we get any funding from the city or other sources, there's a potential. We will prioritize which one will be needed the most, maybe, and then we'll go down that route.
Okay.
And one note on that, Commissioner, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Foothill extension. Well, there are plans. The Foothill extension, honestly, the environmental impact reports, they're done, versus the subway to the sea, which it gets very political. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Boyle, is that the money, the stimulus money, is being redirected towards subway to the sea at this point. And there is a Foothill extension plan, basically, that's under the cover, I should say.
I think you know more about that than I do, Commissioner.
But like Mr. Bagdanian said, that the day will come. Definitely the day will. Proceed.
We'll move to Route 4 next, which, as I mentioned, is a highly productive route in the city, up Chevy Chase, and then it comes back into downtown. Our proposal is to add a bus to this route, take one of the buses we're saving on Route 3, put it on Route 4, extend it west along Broadway to San Fernando Road, That would provide a connection with Metro Rapid 794 along San Fernando and also serve some areas that are not well served now in the city. And now the headway is every 16 minutes with an extra bus. Even with the extension, we'd operate every 15 minutes. We talk sometimes about clock face headways. These are headways that are means the bus comes at the same time every hour. So if you run every 15 minutes, the people don't have to memorize the schedule. They know if it comes at 10 after 1 hour, it's going to come at 10 after the next hour. So this is the proposal for Route 4. Right now it comes up, this is the same, and then it comes through and turns around in downtown and goes back. We would propose continuing it west to pick up, and you see there is an area here where there's fairly high transit orientation. Route 5 comes up Pacific and serves that, but this would provide another east-west connection along the western side of the city to bring people into downtown and to bring people from downtown out to there. Roosevelt Middle School is on this route, and we thought that might be it is a big generator of trips, but the ridership is amazing all along this route. I think it surprised even some of the city staff when we saw the numbers. But you can see the neighborhoods it goes through are kind of transit-oriented, and people are using it just to get around from one place to the other, come up to the Civic Center or go into downtown from wherever they live. So this is a route where the productivity is such that we thought it really could use a little better frequency. 16 to 15 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but when you don't have to stop and think about it, you're more likely to walk out to the bus, and also to serve the area west here that is not served now. And we would take one of the buses we serve on Route 3 and use that to add to Route 4. As Jono said, we're trying to maximize our vehicles where they're most used, and I think this would be an excellent opportunity to do so. Yes?
I'm not convinced about the extension to San Fernando along Broadway. There's just not much there at that point. And the DPSS office down on San Fernando and Pacific there, it has no Beeline service except for one of the express buses. It has no Beeline service at all, and yet that's a very highly used traffic generator. So I would think if we could maybe turn that down Pacific and maybe even make a complete loop on it, to me that would make more sense. It would hit a much deeper pocket of residential transit-orientated neighborhoods down there around the DPSS. So it's just something as a suggestion to look at.
We did think about extending it west along Chevy Chase as well, and also possibly extending the 5 down, and we just couldn't do it within, we'd have to add a fifth bus to this route to do that. The schedule would have been just too tight without it.
Is it the length of the route that it would be? That it's too long, that it would need an extra bus?
Yes, for time purposes. Does it stop? Catherine's pointing out to me the primary reason I picked Broadway was because the rapid stop is at Broadway in San Fernando.
There's a 794 stop at the DPSS office as well, though.
It's okay. At Pacific, and yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm. You're right. It does stop at Pacific. That's right. Okay.
Was the Disney project taken into consideration when you came up with this recommendation? I know it's further up north, but there's lines north to south on San Fernando, and it could be a transfer point.
There was an attempt to just improve the ability to get east-west up in that area, and we thought, you have Route 7, but 7 doesn't come into downtown. So we did think that this Route 4 extension might serve some of those folks as well. It would require a transfer, as you say, but there are routes along San Fernando that would enable that. So it's a good point.
And along those lines of Commissioner Welch's suggestion, we could add as an option, a bus to this route and cost it out, obviously, to see if it could be looked at as one of the recommendations. But it will just take one more bus, based on if you were to do a complete loop.
Yeah, I think you would need one more bus, yes, to do a loop.
So we'll put that in our possible options of like a Route 4A. But then we'll look at it and we will give a recommendation to the Commission and the Council as to what we think based on the resources that we have, what would be the most productive lines. And if we add this amount of more dollars, obviously we can then have a probably better, more productive service.
Okay. Anything else on Route 4?
You can proceed. Thanks.
Thanks. Route 5 is the route that runs up and down Pacific. Hoover is the major trip generator of this. As I think the chair mentioned earlier, it doesn't do nearly as well on weekends, on Saturday when the school isn't in session. Right now, the buses alternate between 20 and 22 minutes headway, and we're recommending to do a consistent headway of 20 minutes on weekdays and 40 minutes on Saturday. It uses 2 buses during the week. It only has 1 bus on the weekend on this route. And we would add a PM tripper. An express bus would pull out early and do a trip on this route to address the overcrowding at Hoover. The 3 o'clock trip is particularly overcrowded. There's a lot of kids who get on there. So we don't have a map for this because we're not changing the routing, just the idea of adding a trip to address the school overcrowding, help out with that, and establish a more consistent headway. Again, this is also the weekday headway, at least, is a clock face headway of every 20 minutes, so the bus will come at the same time every hour. Route 6 is along Colorado. We recommended only minor schedule adjustments. The route actually works very well. It serves Glendale High School, and it carries pretty well all along Colorado. So it's doing just what it's supposed to do, and its frequency is appropriate. So we're only recommending minor running time adjustments, particularly in the afternoon. Some of the trips from the high school get delayed because of the number of kids on there. Anything on Route 5 or Route 6? Move on to Route 7. That runs every 27 minutes now, and we're recommending just to back it off a little bit to every 30 minutes to make it a more easily remembered schedule. Also, in its western end, it goes close to but does not serve a stop at San Fernando and Sonora, which is a big stop for MTA services. So we wanted to just do a minor reroute, turn it down another street. We'll show you on the map. Right here. Right now it comes down, it turns here on Western, then it goes around. And we're proposing just to bring it out San Fernando to Sonora, so we serve the stop and then do the loop around and come back. So serve Sonora in both directions. A minor change. If you go back. Saturday service, this is another route that is very driven by schools, not only by Hoover, but it also goes out to GCC, and Saturday service is very light, so we're proposing a change to Saturday where it would not do the deviation to Hoover and it wouldn't go as far as GCC. We could save a bus and run it with 1 bus on Saturday every 60 minutes. If you go to the map, right now, this is the thing it does to get to Hoover. This is one of the routes that used to be up in the neighborhoods, and you got a few people who didn't like it. So I almost suggested going back up there until Catherine talked to me and said, I don't think so. But another issue is a lot of the kids come from south of Glen Oaks, and it would have been a longer walk if we put it back up on Kenneth. So now it comes in, it makes a kind of an awkward turnaround to get into Hoover. Then it continues east and goes to the college. We'd propose that you cut this turnaround on the weekends when no one's going to the high school, bring it up, and then turn it around at Brand, not run it east to Brand, just have it do a little turnaround here and come back. So you could run it with 1 bus on the weekends. You'd lose this stretch that doesn't really do too much because, again, not many people are going up to the college on the weekends. Some people might go up to use the library, but it's minimal. So that would allow you to save a bus on the weekend, and we would keep it on Glen Oaks, even though it is an overlap with the MTA route. Just from the boardings we saw on there, and not being able to tell exactly where, but the sense from field work is a lot of kids going to the college or the high school were coming from south of here. If we moved it up to Kenneth, well, A, we'd have the neighborhood opposition again, and B, you'd have actually a longer walk for some of the people using it. So we wrestled with this for a while, and we felt the best option is to keep it running on Glen Oaks, both for community reasons and also for ridership reasons. And then just change it a little bit on the weekends where we could save a bus.
Just curious, the overlay on Glen Oaks with the MTA, are the bus stop time almost at the same time with the B line, or they vary easily?
They're not split exactly, but because they have different frequencies, it's not possible to split them exactly, actually. I forget how often, I think the MTA service is certainly more frequent than the 27-minute or what would be 30-minute service along Route 7. I looked at trying to figure out a way to maybe split that, and, it's hard to do. It's hard to do. They're not on top of one another, and I think that's the best we could do is make sure they don't arrive at the same time. So maybe, if it's running, I think it runs every 10 minutes in the peak, so maybe we could make sure that our half hour catches in between two of those 10-minute peaks.
And where does the MTA go toward?
It continues out to the west.
No, on east.
East to downtown.
Downtown.
It turns down Brand and comes downtown.
Have you ever thought about just breaking out, like, before, see this. Since on weekends, Glendale is not heavily used, you just mentioned that, right?
On weekends, it's a light ridership, so we don't think it needs two buses. So that's the cutting it back at Brand would allow it to just run with one bus.
So you're cutting out of Brand?
Yeah, we'd stop it at Brand. We'd run it as, from here to Brand. There's some transit orientation here, and we do get a lot of riders out near the western end of the city on this route. People board it. It was a surprise to me. My first question is, why do you go all the way out here? And then we did the ridership, and I see. People get on there.
Okay.
So, yeah, that would be the recommendation. Because of the different headways between the MTA and our route, it's not possible to really break it perfectly in two, but we do the best we can. And right now it is not on top of an MTA bus. They're not both arriving at the same time.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on Route 7? It was interesting to see the ridership of this out of Glendale Community College, because one of the ideas was, well, do we need to go all the way out there? Maybe we should go to downtown with this. But there are clearly a number of GCC students from the western part of the city who use this every day. Route 11 is the Metrolink shuttle that operates on Brand out of the Glendale Transportation Center. We want to discontinue the first afternoon trip that carries 4 passengers, and instead of starting at 2:48, we'd start at 3:15. We take that bus and put it either on Route 3 or Route 5 to help with overcrowding. And this has become standard now, actually, but allow 2 minutes for the morning train to bus connection, have the bus leave 2 minutes after the train arrives, and they will hold it if the train arrives a little late, up to 5 minutes. Is that right? Okay. And then allow 7 minutes in the afternoon for arrival before the train arrives. We're also looking to time it. One of the reasons this first trip does not do well is the people coming south on the Antelope Valley and the other major line that comes south are the real drivers. They're coming from the north to Glendale or Burbank on Route 12 in the morning, and they're going north in the afternoon. So we tried to make sure we meet those key trains. Some other trains going south to Union Station just don't generate a lot of ridership, or there's one northern train that stops at Burbank, and I think that might have been the train served by this trip, and that's why there's just not many people on it. These folks do have an alternative of taking routes 1 or 2 down at GTC. So that would be the only change for Route 11 is discontinuing that first afternoon trip. And we would use that bus for helping out with some of the overcrowding issues. Route 12, boy, I wish I had a better answer for this, because it's really hard to operate from both stations, from Burbank and from Glendale. But the ridership is such that we really couldn't get to one or the other. One of the other complicating factors is Metrolink has a fare zone change. It's cheaper to ride to Burbank than it is to Glendale from up north. Yeah, that's the fare zone break. You're in a different fare zone if you get off at Glendale compared to Burbank. So we're thinking, okay, we bring people to Glendale. There's a lot of Disney people on this route. They have to pay extra and then ride all the way back. That wasn't going to work. And putting it at Burbank would leave too many people who do use it at Glendale. So what we proposed is to discontinue 1 afternoon trip to Burbank and 2 afternoon trips to Glendale. These are very low ridership. I think we have one passenger on all three of these trips combined. It's just early in the day, and they're meeting the wrong trains, if you will. And these were where we were going to, I'm sorry, I said we're at 11, we'd pull out that bus early. We're just going to pull that bus out a little later. The Route 12 buses are the ones we would use on routes 3 and 5 to alleviate overcrowding. They would go and do a Route 3 trip and then come to the station and be ready to start Route 12 service. And the second one would do a Route 5 trip and then come to the station and be ready to start Route 12 service. We have 4 buses altogether on Route 12. And none of the things we tried to run out of one station was really helping that number. If I could have gotten a bus down, I might have been willing to say maybe we take that hit from people and do it because we'd save money, but it's frustrating, but it doesn't work. So we keep the service at both stations. We take a couple of trips out, and we'd use those buses to help overcrowding with the 3 and 5. And we'd have the bus-to-train connection and train-to-bus connection, as I talked about on Route 11. Yes, only on weekdays. Route 11 as well is only on weekdays. They only meet the Metrolink trains on weekdays.
Now, I'm never one to be a fan of diminishing service for public transit, but I just have a lot of problems with Route 12. It's really expensive to operate, and especially reading in this that we're getting a write-off from Metrolink that they're, I guess, not paying us money that presumably they owe us. It just really makes me question the wisdom of continuing this route.
Well, it does have ridership. It does serve a market. Its productivity is so low because of the two-station operation. That means, you're having layover in both places, which is unproductive time where the bus is staying, but it does count as revenue hours because it is out in service. It's just waiting.
If I can chime in, I commute down San Fernando Road at least 2 times a week, and every time I see a number 12 bus, it has no passengers on it. This morning alone, was driving down 2 buses within a couple of minutes, neither one, both number 12s, neither one had a single passenger.
The ones that meet the key trains coming south and north in the afternoon do carry. There are some trips that carry, or else I would have been right with you and said, let's get rid of this. We tried to take out the trips that we could save a bus on and do something with. And I don't think anyone will be affected by these changes. But there are people who use it, and it was just I wasn't quite to the point of getting rid of it entirely.
Well, I don't know. I'm still on the fence. This route costs about $400,000 a year in subsidies from the city, so that's a lot of change.
And I'm on board with Commissioner Welch. At $4.81, I believe, is that the figure per passenger cost?
Yes.
And that's very close to Route 13. And honestly, this day and age, we need to realize what the economy is like. The tax base is not going up, it's diminishing. And we need to give somewhere to be able to improve the service on the other lines. And I second that.
That we have, so.
I appreciate your comments. I'm usually not in this position of not proposing to continue something that you are willing to see give up, and I appreciate that. I think your arguments there's some valid arguments, but I did see some numbers on some of those trips, and I think it's worth further thought. Thanks for sharing that.
Questions, Bill? Okay, thank you. You can
Okay,
proceed.
now we go to Route 13. And the proposal here is to discontinue this route. We have 41 daily riders on the 5 trips. Of those, only 6 of the boardings and 12 of the alightings are east of State Route 2 in the canyon area, in the Glen Oaks Canyon area, which has low transit orientation. That's not really a surprise. But you think about 41 riders, and most of those are on portions of the route that have other service, either Beeline service or MTA service. The productivity, 13.4 passengers per revenue hour, is the lowest of any route you operate, and it's poor by any measure. And I think you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, the cost per boarding of $568,
Yes.
which is 3 times the system average. It's very hard to justify continuation of that service, so the recommendation is to discontinue the route.
Mr. Chairman, in the way of background, this portion that we operate, part of it is Route 201 that operated by MTA. Because it was not a productive line, or MTA is trying to make some of their lines, their low ridership, they were dropping it. So MTA decided to drop the portion of the Route 201. Was serving Glendale, it was in the canyon. It was very low. We debated that for a long time. We had a lot of input from the residents that are actually riding it. And we came back to City Council. Council discussed it and asked us to continue or provide a service, a level of service. So Route 13 was created, but it's always been very, very expensive. And staff strongly recommends that even though we hate to take out transit service, still people are riding it. But this is a very expensive route to operate when we have other needs, overcrowding in other parts of the Beeline system. So that is an area that MTA dropped it because it wasn't productive, and we picked it up to address the needs of our residents. But we knew, and we've always said, that it is very expensive to operate that route.
Was that temporary, Mr. Bagdanian?
It was temporary. We've stretched it, but we've gotten to a point that, given our current financial situation, we have to make some difficult decisions on these routes and see where we can spend the money to get the biggest bang for our buck.
So is it every year renewable, or it's still temporary in the books?
Yeah, it is. I would consider it temporary,
Right.
And we wanted to conduct a line-by-line analysis to have additional information to show that it is not very productive line. It's worst line we operate.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you.
one
Yes.
question. Mr. Boyle, have you seen, and this is nationwide, any transit service where such a low ridership line is priced differently from the others? In other words, let's say we were to keep Route 12, but if you're going to take Route 12, for us to justify it, the fare is $4. It's not 50 cents anymore, or it's not $1 anymore. Just curious if you've seen it anywhere else.
I don't think that's been an option. It's an interesting option, but I don't think that's been implemented anywhere. I think many transit agencies are leery of what that could lead to. You know, the ultimate is a different fare for every route, depending on how, and I recognize that's not what you're proposing. It's saying there's a way to keep this route. Let's charge more money so we get some kind of return on it.
We're not talking profit, just break even.
Right. Well, not even break even. Just
Not
come
even
up
break
to your
even.
system.
Subsidize some of it.
Yeah, system
Diminish
average.
the
And
subsidy.
It's anytime you raise fares, of course, you will reduce ridership some. So it becomes a very difficult. It's almost like a chicken and egg in reverse of how you address that issue. To answer your question directly, I can't think of any place that has done that on a one route basis.
Mr. Bagdanian, was Route 13, when the MTA was had that section, was the fare was the same as the Beeline?
No, we were using, the riders used the MTA fare.
Is the MTA fare?
And then when we
remember-
operated it, we converted it to the Beeline fare. So riders just use a quarter and the seniors use a dime.
So it's the same thing as an MTA, you saying?
No, it is not the same thing.
Right. So what was the MTA when the MTA was?
$1.25 for the
Okay,
using the 201 line.
that's interesting. So different.
What I
Different
would say is
agency
if you
would-
drop
yeah.
the fare that much and you still don't get ridership, it
Right.
tells you
That's
something.
what I was going to get to.
It tells you something.
So the fare has nothing to do with. The ridership had nothing to do with the fare regarding the Route 13.
Well, there is no ridership, period.
No, I'm comparing with the MTA when the MTA was performing that route versus the Beeline. And the Beeline is a lot cheaper than the MTA, and the ridership did not improve.
In fact, as I would say, if Dan explains a little more in detail, the segment, we modified Route 13. In other words, originally when we just operated, because 201 did not terminate completely, we provided the Route 13 to the terminus of Route 201.
It was a hospital.
To the hospital. And then Because it was not that productive, we figured let's extend it, at least bring them into downtown so that we can get more productivity out of it. So I would say a lot of the productivity is not in the portion that we eliminated, MTA dropped, is in the area that we picked up as a result of extending it. So if you just take out the unproductive portion, still it's an unproductive line, but it's more productive where we added service. So again, we're recommending that the service be discontinued.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, this kind of ends the second portion of our, through the recommendations, the line by line. You've been asking questions all along, so I don't know if we need any other.
No, before you proceed to the next section, if I may, if I have 3 cards here. If they might have some input from the public. But, Joe T. Laporte. Danner Laporte. The left. Brooke Gear Pearson, I believe. Sorry if I misspell or mispronounce your name.
Good evening, Commissioners. I am Brooke Gear-Person. I am the Executive Director of the Glendale Transportation Management Associates. The Glendale Transportation Management Associates works with businesses in Glendale to help employees get to Glendale without their car. So the thing that I hate the most is one person in one car. So my focus is to get people on buses. My focus is to get people on Metrolink. My focus is to get people in van pools, in carpools. I do a lot of events with employees. I hear a lot of comments from employees. I have no research. This is wonderful research. But I wanted to toss a couple of things that every time I do an employee event, I get asked. The first one you aren't going to want to hear. They would like to have Route 11 meet the Amtrak train that leaves the Glendale Transportation Center. I think it's at 307. It's either 303 or 307. That is the number one requested route change that I get. In fact, I actually went to one event and I had 4 people nail me in a corner. Why can't we get this? So there is some very strong request for Route 11 to do this. Another problem that I personally have is I go to Metro monthly and tell them that they need to change that tap card to an Easy Pass so the Glendale B line can use it. I'm a firm believer on making it easy. The staff that I talk to aren't getting it. So I would throw this at people that are at your level. You need to start talking to the uppity-ups of Metro and say, you've got to get that Easy Pass on tap. It is so needed, so needed. The other thing is on the Route 12. I'm not concerned about San Fernando Road. I travel San Fernando Road even more than you do. But I know on Flower it is heavily used. So if you wanted to cut it off and just service the businesses there off of Flower, I'd have no problems with that. But we
Serving
need
it out
to
of Burbank,
provide...
you mean out of the Burbank train
yes,
station?
out of the Burbank. We need to provide service out of the Burbank train station to the people that work off of Flower because there is a large number of people and I don't want them in their cars driving. So that's something that I am very strongly in favor of, in that we have to continue the service there off of Flower. The other thing, since I have time, the suggestions are all really great. I really would like to start now with making sure there's budget for system maps and things like that, because those are really hot items when I go out and talk to employees. So I would like to support the Beeline staff with money to do those kinds of things. So anyway, again, I am here on behalf of employees. I realize I'm not the only residents I represent are the residents who live in Glendale and work in Glendale. But I do hear a lot from the employees who come to Glendale to work. And those are some of my initial comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the final part of our presentation tonight is the new services that have been proposed either through a mobility study or through community requests. We list them all here. I won't talk about each one individually. We did address each one in the report. Just want to highlight a couple of them and talk about them. One is the buzz. We talked about that briefly earlier. The recommendation for doing the frequency part of it without necessarily the branding part of it would cost about $36,000 a year, primarily because we're adding a little more service on Saturday and Sunday. I talked to Bonnie Nelson, who has worked on the mobility plan with the City Council, and she was very happy with that recommendation. She thought the frequency was the key. It'd be nice to have it branded. But then we looked at what it would cost to split that interline apart and be able to brand the buses. You'd run the cost up to $300,000, plus you'd need an extra bus because you'd lose the benefits that the interlining offers you of operating only with 5 buses. We also looked at, is 15-minute service enough to get people out of their offices and willing to take the bus to noontime restaurants or shopping? The recommendation was for 15 minutes on the buzz, but we wanted to look at some of the other options. So if we ran 7.5-minute service along the heart of Brand, and I would say that's between the 134 and Colorado, and we'd add 3 more buses in, it would cost $582,000 additionally to do it. That's an aggressive plan, 7.5-minute service. If we went to 10-minute service along the heart of Brand and maybe ran 20-minute service everywhere else, it'd be $345,000, and we'd add 2 buses. So just some kind of sense of the impacts of what we do if we tried we might call it a pure buzz approach versus the modified buzz approach that we have in the plan to get to the recommendation service-wise in terms of frequency, but not necessarily be able to brand all the buses because we keep them interlined with Route 2 along Central. This is just for kind of your information, I guess, in terms of our best estimates of what it would cost to do it a little differently, maybe more aggressively than it was proposed. And that's the reason why we didn't propose the branding and the frequency. Our recommendation was, let's see if the frequency is enough to get folks. The 15-minute frequency, which was proposed for the buzz, let's see what happens to ridership on Brand with that before we think about, do we need to brand it? And I hate using brand on brand, but that's basically what it is. Have buses, special buses that are marked specially. That will attract some people, but the sense, and I think Bonnie supported me on this, is that the frequency was the key element. So that's why we recommended the 15-minute service, because we can do it with some adjustments to Central. We can do it within basically the existing funding envelope. Northwest Glendale.
If I may, just, Mr. Chairman, that's in addition if we have to buy the buses. So if we're adding a bus right now in our existing fleet, as you saw, we're using those buses to operate our daily peak service and with spare buses. So if Dan is saying we're going to have to add 3 buses, we have to buy those buses at a cost of at least almost $400,000. So that will have a huge
Right.
It would have a major impact in our current Beeline system funding. So that's one of the other areas. So it's not only $582,000 or $345,000. It's in addition to buying 2 buses and maintaining them over the years that we would have to operate the system. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Walsh.
Just on the while we're talking about the buzz, I agree with you about the branding issue. I don't think that that's necessary. To me, as a user of public transit, it's more about the frequency than it is about the brand. I think that's just about sending the message out there. But I think that if we could, with funds permitting at some point in time, if we could perhaps run a test, do some PR and stuff like that to, the businesses along Brand, to do a 1-month test where just maybe at lunchtime from 12 to 2 or something like that, where you did implement that 7.5 minutes. So you put in, if it could be worked logistically and stuff like that, to just do that, to test, to see how many people you could get out of their offices to take advantage of it. That would be invaluable data, looking forward.
Okay. I will say that the 7.5-minute scenario, we assumed operating between 10 and 4, I think, for that. But 12 and 2 would be more focused on the lunchtime, and it's an interesting concept.
Just a suggestion.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if you're going from Colorado to 134, you better walk. It's ridiculous.
Fair enough. Anything else on the buzz?
Just briefly, one of the issues that's been mentioned is the possibility of using smaller vehicles rather than a full-size 71-passenger bus. One of the things I've heard regarding that is that the cost difference is not all that large between the large and small vehicles, because the majority of the cost has to do with paying the driver and other kinds of issues. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay.
I mean, I think 80% of the cost is the labor involved and so forth. So you really don't get savings.
You're not buying yourself much by moving to a smaller vehicle.
Yeah, you still have to put the operator in the seat to run the bus, and that is the main cost of any transit system. So that's why some agencies that have tried smaller buses have been a little surprised that the cost savings were not as much as they thought they would be because of that issue. Glad you brought that up. That's a good point. And, Jono, thank you for bringing up the capital piece. You can tell I'm an operating guy. I always forget about the capital you need to buy the buses, but that was a good point. With at about $400,000 a bus, when you get up to 1, 2, 3 buses, you are talking some real money.
Plus maintenance.
Plus maintenance, yep. Okay, anything else on the buzz? Let's go to Northwest Glendale again. This is an area that along Kenneth that was previously served by Metro Line 183, and we had Route 7 up there for a while, and the neighbors asked us to remove it, so we did. And we didn't recommend bringing it back primarily because of the impact of the walk distance. If we were up at Kenneth instead of Glen Oaks, a lot of the students, both at Hoover High and going all the way to GCC, appeared to be coming from the south up to Glen Oaks, and they would have a long 2-block extra walk to get up to Kenneth. And the transit orientation along Kenneth really doesn't justify a route. Working with Metro to reroute Line 183 is a long-range option to provide service in this area. It's not served right now. Of course, the residents did not appear to want the service when it was there and asked that it be removed, so there is an issue of whether we ever want to go there again. But the way to do it after a lot of going back and forth was not to reroute Route 7 because it works where it is. Even though there is some overlap, there's not the same market. Kids going to Hoover High do not take or kids going to GCC for that matter, don't take the Metro bus. They wait for the Route 7.
I think the main issue I remember that the Route 7 on Kenneth had to do with basically quality of life issues. They didn't want buses on single-family residential neighborhood going up and down, and the noise factor. That was the main reason.
And that certainly is not the only area where I've seen that.
Right.
That's a common reaction, I think, in neighborhoods like that. I mean, you see the incomes are pretty respectable. You don't have the orientation toward transit there, and maybe if you lived there and you had a kid in Hoover High, you'd be approving of that. But if you didn't, probably just as happy not to have the bus on the street. Good question. Anything else on Northwest Glendale? I think we have one other example I used, the Old Town Montrose trolley. There's a proposal, and I love that Montrose business area there, a couple of blocks. It's really pretty. I had not seen that before when I worked years ago here in Glendale. it's a really cool area, and the idea of a trolley is theoretically appealing, but I couldn't recommend it for a couple of reasons. One is, other than the shops there in that 2-block area, I don't see an anchor for service. I don't see where people would come from. There's no residential areas up there that are really dense that would justify, running a trolley over to there so people could get over. And I couldn't answer the question of who would be served by a trolley, where we'd run it to get people to bring it there. It doesn't need it to just run up and down the 2 blocks there of the shops. Obviously, the part of the appeal of that area is the walking between the shops. And the other thing is parking is plentiful up there. And that's takes away what one of the primary incentives for people to use transit is if there's no parking or if it's too expensive. And those cases don't hold there. So I just could not find a justification for doing some kind of a trolley service there. It was a theoretically appealing idea, but I couldn't recommend it. So those are a few of the sample areas. In a nutshell, we didn't recommend any new service this time around in the line-by-line for these 4 reasons, and they might have been different for each one. John mentioned the capital cost of adding a bus. We'd have to add a bus to do any of these, and the operating cost would be involved either. We'd have to add at least 1 bus on any of these routes that were proposed, sometimes 2. In some cases, we had operating issues. I looked at Adams Hill because we got an email from it. I tried to find a place that we could turn around on top of the hill so we wouldn't have to go down to Verdugo, and I was scared to death that somebody was going to run over me. It's people park on the street, there's 1 lane, and there's blind curves all over the place, so we would have to run all the way back down the hill to Verdugo into Los Angeles and then come back up. It would just not make sense. For operating issues, I understand people's desires to have something there, but it just there's no place we can turn. Duplication with Metro. The one area there is South Glendale Avenue, where the 90 and 91, is that right? They're on South Glendale. They run about every 10 minutes in the peak. There is no Beeline service there, and it's an area that has some orientation toward transit, but it would be hard to go to Metro and make an argument that we're going to start a new Beeline route right on top of your 10-minute service. If it were a 30-minute service, it would be one thing, but they're running very frequent service. I recognize there's a cost differential that makes it attractive for people to have Beeline, but I don't think we could win that argument with Metro to say, well, we're going to run on top of you here. In other cases, we have somewhat different markets. Here, I don't think we could make that argument as effectively. So that was a reason for not doing it. And finally, in some places, as I mentioned, like Montrose, there's an uncertain market for service. This might apply in far north Glendale as well, but we do talk in the report, as I mentioned earlier, in response to the question, Commissioner, about some kind of service along Foothill in the future, possibly, that could, it could extend what we have right now with La Cañada Flintridge. They obviously don't want to pay for going into Glendale or down, they might want to pay down to Pasadena, who knows? We haven't met with them yet. But there would be some kind of cost sharing to have some kind of a route along Glendale and provide through service along Glendale. But again, with the operating capital cost of that, we're not recommending that at the moment. So I'd like to go over and summarize what we recommend and get I think I've gotten a sense as we've gone through, but if you want to comment again on whether you approve or disapprove of these ideas as we go through, that'd be appreciative. One is routes 1 and 2 providing 15-minute service on Brand and 30-minute service on Central, just as far north as Doran, keeping them interlined, but getting to the frequency that the Buzz idea was proposing for Brand service. The second is Route 3, operating alternate trips only to GCC and calling it something else than Route 3 so that people would not get confused. Every other trip would go up to JPL. We'd work with La Cañada Flintridge to improve their schedule on the shuttle so that it would actually provide effective 20-minute service on Foothill Boulevard. Shift the express hours that they run in the morning that are very underused to the afternoon to help out with the school, and we'd add a school tripper to help out with the school traffic there as well. Route 4, which is one of our most productive routes. We'd extend that on Broadway to San Fernando and operate every 15 minutes, whereas now we operate every 16 minutes. I did hear a proposal to think about a different way of doing that, and we'll look into that and get back to you, the Commission. Route 5, consistent 20-minute service on weekdays, 40 minutes on weekends, and we'd add a school tripper in the afternoon to help out with the loads at Hoover. Route 6, we were proposing no changes except for some schedule adjustments that we're proposing for all of these routes. Route 7, a 30-minute service on weekdays. Right now we have 27-minute service, but that would regularize it, make it clock-face and easier to remember. And Saturday, we would streamline service, not go to Hoover High, and shorten it at Brand as the eastern terminus, not go to GCC as well. That would allow us to cut a bus out on Saturday and run it with one bus, as we do with Route 5. Route 13 goes away under our proposal, and we discontinue selected Metrolink shuttle trips that are very lightly used on routes 11 and 12. This would free up some buses to use to help out with the school overcrowding. I know you've commented as we've gone through. I don't know if there's any further comments that you want to offer.
Just for curiosity, Route 12, we had a speaker who spoke and gave an idea. How about cutting it down to Flower?
And not serving GTC?
Right.
Just serve Burbank and Flower? That's something we could look at. I looked at almost operating two services, one from Burbank and one from Glendale, and they'd kind of cross somewhere in the Flower area. If we just operated one, certainly we could look at that. So I had a note on that when she spoke, and I will run that scenario and return to the information to the Commission.
Mr. Chair, I would like, when you look at it, I would like to base it on ridership. I mean, as much as I don't like to see one person in a vehicle, I also don't like to see 4 passengers on one bus.
That's true.
Fair enough.
Yes.
And I will say that the reason we didn't propose cutting it is some of those trips do carry. When they're meeting, it depends on the train they're meeting. There's a sense that, we try to meet every train, and really some of the scheduling adjustments we were talking about on Route 12 focused on meeting those trains where people want to get on those, the Antelope Valley line and the other line north, that really do, I think, probably 80% of the business on Route 12 comes from those lines.
I mean, if it's needed, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
You mentioned earlier, does the Burbank bus, if they have one, I think they have one, do they service the same route too?
No, they don't come into Glendale.
They don't come to Glendale.
And as a matter of fact, I think they just discontinued their downtown circulator that came out of the Burbank station because of budget cuts. So I think they still have some routes, but fewer routes than they used to at the station, and they don't come down into Glendale at all.
No kidding.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, again, as a way of background on those express services that we operate Metrolink, as was once Metrolink started, all the cities were very anxious to help, this whole system to grow, and has grown, and it's become a very important part of commuter transportation in this region in LA County. And the city of Glendale, as it serves the Glendale Transportation Center, we provided these routes. But many times we keep evaluating it because as Metrolink changes their schedules, it will make it difficult. Even if we were to cut it in half, potentially, if Metrolink starts changing their schedule, and then we have to relook at that again, because now maybe we can cut the first trip and the first trip on, or the last trip, but then in between, all of a sudden, they start adding more service, and then we get more commuters complaining to us, why are you cutting the service? So it's a constant process that we look at the service of the Metrolink, because it's a commuter service, because they're trying to reduce the traffic on the freeway. We've always given it a higher priority, and knowing that it's more expensive to operate the Metrolink Express service versus the downtown service. So that is a policy decision has to be made. Where do you put the resources? Do you serve the commuters that are coming at a longer distance, or the ones that are operating in Glendale downtown at a shorter distance? So we got very good comments from all the commissioners, so we'll go back and look at that option.
Thank you.
What are the impacts of the recommendations? We can reduce the net operating cost by over $200,000, and that comes from reallocating service to where it's most used. We'd see a slight ridership and revenue increase as a result, and this is just focused on the operations, not on the fare piece. They're calculated separately. But we would see a slight ridership and revenue increase, again, because we're putting service in areas where it's more likely to be used. The number of peak vehicles would be reduced by 2. Recall, we saved 2 buses off Route 3, we put 1 back onto Route 4, and we save one on Route 13, except we don't really save that one. Right now that's run with a paratransit vehicle by Southland, and it would go back into demand responsive service, so it wouldn't be saving a bus, really. However, La Cañada Flintridge is buying a new bus, and we've been talking to them about maybe giving us back the one that they loaned from us. I'm not sure where that stands, but certainly we would reduce the number of peak vehicles we need. We'd save at least one of the, you call them big buses, and that includes any of the Beeline buses. These cost reductions turn out to offset the impacts of lower Prop A and Prop C revenues. As I mentioned at the start of this process, I didn't have a budget envelope, a funding envelope, which sometimes I like to start with, but we said, let's just go through this and try to rationalize the system based on current usage and what we see as potential future changes, and this is the way it came out. So those cost reductions will help us in this particular economic times when the Prop A and Prop C revenues are being reduced. Now, I don't know what the Prop A and Prop C numbers will be finally, so we added some additional cost-cutting measures that we're not recommending in the study, but they're there as ideas if they're necessary, if the Prop A and Prop C picture looks worse than we think it is. One is to discontinue select early and late trips. In other words, not run everything from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Some of those early trips are not used on particular routes, and so we could adjust the service span for a route depending on what the ridership is. And I think we looked at, if we didn't have at least 10 riders, maybe think about that route that trip as a potential for discontinuation. Go to 30-minute service on routes 1 and 2, and kind of that would be abandoning the idea of the buzz and cutting back service from where it is now. But routes 1 and 2 do not rank particularly highly in terms of productivity. This is a thing that you could do that would save some money. Get rid of Saturday service on routes 5 and 7. We mentioned these are the lightly used routes on Saturday because they're so school-driven in terms of ridership. We did a proposal to cut back the number of buses on Route 7 from 2 to 1, but the more draconian possibility, if you have to cut costs more, is to eliminate Saturday service on both these routes. With these measures all told, we'd have an annual additional net savings of $341,000 over and above the $223,000 that we had from our recommendations. So these are out there as ideas in the event that we do need to cut service further, depending on how the Prop A and Prop C numbers look and how the budget looks for next year. And I think that's it. Thank you so much for your attention and the questions. These have been great.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boyle.
Mr. Chairman, in the area of the fare structure, I don't know, we've really had a lot of good discussion on it.
Yeah.
I would like to receive input from the Commission as to the fare structure that was being proposed in the timing or we wanted to structure it so it goes up to 50 cents, 75 cents, and $1. So that would be helpful to us to get your input as to the concept of the fare structure we're recommending and the sequencing or timing of it.
I'm just curious, even with this fare structure, how do we stack up with other bus companies? Are we still in the middle? Are we below? Are we one of the cheapest?
We're one of the cheapest.
We are one of the cheapest. Give me, if you can give us who's right next next in line with.
I'm looking for that now.
Okay.
Chair.
And what will be the delta on that?
Table 4.3 on page 47 of the report lists the local cash fares for Glendale, Beeline, and several other municipal services. The only one close to you is actually LADOT's Dash service is also 25 cents. Culver City, Gardena, Norwalk, Pasadena, Santa Monica are all at 75 cents, and Culver City, I think, has just gone up to $1 since this was published.
And that's current, right?
Current, yes. Burbank and Foothill are $1. Torrance is $1. I think they may be planning an increase. Long Beach and Montebello are $1.10. So you are clearly the lowest, along with LA Dot, not the commuter services, but the dash services.
And I think we spoke about this in the past, and I was intrigued by how low it was, and I was proposing something a little bit still higher, and I don't know what happened to that, but my preference would be, 50 cents for 2010 is still very cheap. I don't know how my colleagues feel. I have no problem with 75, even $1 starting 2010. I know it's a big delta between what we have today versus what we're proposing for next year, but it's still cheaper than gas and cheaper than... you can't even buy a French fries with 50 cents anymore at McDonald's. So I don't know how my colleagues feel on that. Mr. Welch.
Well, I have mixed feelings. Because I certainly, don't like seeing, the kind of subsidies that we're running. But at the same time, I'm with the speaker earlier that, we need to get people out of cars, and we all know that there is a price elasticity of demand when it comes to transit decisions. So the more you raise the price, the lower ridership you're going to get. You indicated that in the report. So,
It's on? Oh,
yeah, it's on. So, I'm not convinced to go higher than 50 cents. I think I could get behind and support a 50-cent price and 25 cents for seniors, but higher than that at this point, I'm not there because I think you'd have too much impact on ridership. Your ridership would be lower, and I think that it really defeats the purpose of the transportation goals of the city. I think that if funding is an issue and we've got big budget caps, I think we need to talk about other alternatives rather than fare box increases. But 50 cents, I'm okay. But beyond that, I'm not.
Well, the case in point was Route 13.
Mm-hmm.
When they had the MTA route, they were paying $1.25. The ridership never went up, and now we have the B line. It's 50 cents or a quarter for senior citizens. The ridership never went up. So the logic about low fare that will increase to passengers, it doesn't add up.
Well, but in that particular case, it didn't, because I think you had a community that just wasn't transit-oriented. But much of Glendale that is served by the B line is transit-oriented, and I think that you would see a more impact from that.
Again, I'm just comparing with other cities too. Mr. Boyle just mentioned about other companies.
Well, the real impact of transit decisions comes from the cost of gasoline, actually more so than the cost of transit. So when you summer of 2008 was a classic example. You saw price elasticity right in action. Car trips went down, gas purchases went down, public transit ridership went way up. So when gas cost $4 and $5 a gallon, it makes an impact on people's decisions.
Just bear in mind, this has never been increased since 1992 or 1993.
I know,
So
that's why I'm saying I'm
amazing.
okay with the 50 cents, but
Right.
but I'm not ready for higher than that.
Okay. Mr.
Mr. Chair, if I could add to that, we
Yes.
did ask people in the survey if the increased costs require the Glendale B line to raise fares or reduce service, which option would you prefer? And 57% said they'd prefer we raise fares, 27% said they'd prefer we reduce weekend service, and 15% said they'd reduce weekday service first.
So none spoke about reducing the fare.
57% said
Reducing.
raise the fare. Nobody
Raise.
called, no,
Yeah,
reducing the fare
nobody-
was not an option we gave them. But we did ask them, too, what would be the maximum acceptable B-line fare to you? And 48% said 50 cents, as no surprise. Another 20% said, no, I'd rather see you reduce service, don't have an increase. But 6% said they'd be willing to pay $1.25, and 6% said they'd be willing to pay $1, which surprised me that people would say that on a survey. I mean, it's just, I expected to see 90% of the people say 50 cents and the other 10% say don't touch my fare. So there is, I think, a sense among riders that they're really getting a good deal now. I mean, they ride other systems. Most of your riders, I think, will get on a metro bus and see how much it costs, or maybe if they're traveling in the Los Angeles basin, they'll get on another municipal system and see it cost more. So I got the sense from that, the response to that question, certainly 50 cents is the most acceptable increase because it was the lowest one we offered. But I do think there is a sense that people know that they're getting a really good deal now.
Yes. Do we know, by just curiosity, that just by increasing by a quarter, what would be the revenue?
We do know that. In the report, I think because it was being phased, we estimated it for just a partial year, but I did some numbers.
Just for the public to know.
I think we would, as the Commissioner pointed out, when you raise fares, you do reduce ridership. We estimated that ridership might drop by about 21%, but revenue would go up by 36%. It would increase. I'm sorry, that's the wrong figures. Ridership would go down by 23%. 21% was right,
and
okay.
up by 35.5.
Okay, revenue would go up by 36% to about $575,000 from $425,000. So it would be an increase of about $150,000 in revenue from just the increase to 50 cents.
Thank you.
You'd obviously see more revenue increases and ridership decreases at higher rates.
Mr. Weissman.
Yeah, I would pretty much agree with what Commissioner Welch said, especially the comments about the elasticity of fares. I think as long as they are, below $1, it's probably less of an issue. But as they start, climbing up past 50 cents to 75 cents, I think there will be, that might result in a greater decrease in ridership. And again, there's a sweet spot out there somewhere where you have the exact fare versus ridership that maximizes your revenue without, But, I think in practicality, it's kind of hard to achieve that. I think another thing that Commissioner Welch said is very important that I want to emphasize is he talked about goals for transit in the city of Glendale. And again, probably the appropriate venue for that discussion is when we have our joint study session, easy for me to say, with the City Council. But really it does come down to that, because if it has to do with what strategic goals we are trying to implement in terms of our use of transit in the city of Glendale, it may not necessarily fall into line with goals of maximizing ridership or revenue or things of that nature. There may be, things we want to do even if they're not necessarily as productive or as revenue generating as we'd like, because there are other good reasons for doing them. So I look forward to having that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Sarkian.
For me, the way I look at it is very simple. If the money to subsidize the service is available, heck, do it for free. If the money is not there, the city needs to come up with the funding to run the services. Now, this puts us in front of the following situation. Would you rather increase the fare to 50 cents, 75 cents, or would you rather go with the second recommendation, which gives us an additional $352,000 in savings, and cut out completely weekend service for some lines, and then eliminate 6 a.m. weekday service and start at 7 a.m.? It's a balance. 50 cents I think is reasonable. Honestly, I think 75 cents is reasonable. If you're to compare the service, basically our fares to other cities, we're at the bottom. Now, yes, LA DOT, they do have service at 25 cents, but they also secure more subsidies and more funding from MTA and the feds probably. So, on that sense, I'm okay with what's proposed here, but what I would like to see, once we reach the 75-cent mark, then kick in the second set of recommendations, which would generate an additional $352,000 in savings before going to the $1.
Which is getting rid of line.
Which is, can we go
5,
back
7?
one slide, please?
I think
It's
way at
the
the
last way at the end.
Yeah, right there.
Okay, these are not necessary, but these are recommendations. $341,000 in savings. I'm fine all the way to 75 cents, and this is, I mean, it's just a recommendation. Council needs to make the final decision on this one. Before going to $1, maybe we can consider kicking this option.
Okay.
Well, I'll chime in on that a little bit, because I don't think that they have to be mutually exclusive. I don't think that you have to have either 75 cents or $1 or these cost-cutting measures. I think that we need to, like Bill was saying, we need to look at the whole complexity of the mobility and transit issues in the city and other potential funding options. And I only kind of throw that out there, and I'm not going to go into any detail because we're talking with the task force that's dealing with the downtown multifamily housing and issues, impacts from the meters and all that kind of stuff. So one of the things that we've been talking about is, looking at the pricing and the cost of parking and, coupled and decoupled parking with apartments and things like that. So we can maybe get into that a little bit more when we do the study session and talk about other potential revenue options that might help do things like further a goal of having increased service at a very reasonable price for the city.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Appreciate all the comments. Just want to add a couple of comments from my perspective on the fare. We are going to look at all these options. We're putting together a financial plan that we will also share with the Commission, with the City Council, and basically give you the bottom line of what we're looking at as we go forward. We usually are looking 5 years ahead. What is our bottom line or reserve? Is it going to last for the next 5 years? And these are real numbers. I mean, the deficit that we will be facing with, like anybody else, is real number, and it's now, and it may happen in the next 2 years. So any long-term policy decisions we make, it's not going to help us right now, because it not necessarily is going to generate enough revenue, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in this economic situation in order to be able to subsidize the transit. So we will be faced with some hard decision. Either we have to raise the fares, whatever years, 1 year, 2 years, 3 year sequences, or actually cut service in certain areas. So those are some of the options that are hard to choose from, or you have to come up with a balanced recommendation. We will put together some scenarios as we go forward and bring them to the Commission and to the City Council, and also looking into other sources of funding, whether the parking fund, revenues generated from meters can subsidize part of this transit that is operated in the downtown area. So those are some of the revenue options we'll certainly bring in. But the issue we're faced with as staff is this issue is now. In other words, any long-term strategies or plans that we put in place it will not help us now, next year, in the next 2 or 3 years, where we need to make sure that our transit service at least operates at the level that we're currently providing. Gas prices are going up, wages are going up, and vehicles, as Catherine showed you, some of those vehicles are very old. We're very lucky and fortunate that we've been able to aggressively get grant funds to replace our vehicles. Without those grant funds, we would have very serious service cuts that we will be facing. So appreciate all the comments and in all the service recommendations and in the fare structure. I know those are always difficult decisions to be made, but I think we got very good input from the Commission. As I said, we will take these into account. We go back and work with Dan to come up with some of the suggestions that you have. We will be planning a study session with City Council so that we can walk them through, maybe not at the level of details that we provided to the Commission, because we wanted you to see all the complexities, but at least some of the key areas that we think on the recommendation side that we need to get council approval to proceed. So that ends my comments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rakayan.
Great presentation, thank you.
Great report,
Thank you so
Mr. Boyle.
much. It was a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to do this.
And thanks also to the folks from NV Transportation that came by. I'm glad you were able to make it tonight. I know this isn't the most exciting thing to be doing on a Monday evening, but we appreciate you came down here.
Monday Night Football. Thanks for the speakers.
Okay. What's next?
Item 6, Commission, staff comments, updates.
Any comments from my fellow commissioners?
One comment, Mr. Chair, Mr. Bagdanian, you might want to look at the intersection of Glendale and Glen Oaks. This was brought up in the past. I think Chairman brought it up a couple of times, and I did once regarding the left turn phasing, eastbound to northbound. And
You mean the 134?
the 134, yes.
Monterey.
I'm sorry, yes.
Monterey.
134 or Monterey?
No, no.
134.
No, actually, it's Glen Oaks and Glendale. Glen Oaks at where the Unical gas station?
Yes.
See? Okay.
Yes. The left turn, and I've been observing it, especially it's during rush hour traffic, but extremely it is backing up. So I don't know if there's any
Rush
funding
hour,
or-
AM.
AM rush hour, PM rush hour, lunchtime also. Specifically, last Monday, stopped and observed for about 10 to 15 minutes. AM rush hour, you're lucky to clear 3 to 4 vehicles, and what people are doing, they're proceeding straight to the next intersection, hanging a left turn, and coming behind Ralph's to Vertigo. They're trying to bypass it. Yeah.
We'll have staff check into the timing, for sure. I believe we added some time, but maybe not enough. I will double check.
Well, the westbound traffic going to the freeway is high volume, so there's no gap basically for the left turners during AM peak hour. PM peak hour is a little better.
Are you talking about on Glen Oaks or on Glendale making a left turn?
No, now I'm moving down to the winter. On Glen Oaks.
The first
Glen
one.
Oaks, yes.
Glen Oaks, right? Yes. That will alleviate a lot of traffic in residential neighborhood if they increase it.
The bypass
Right.
will move out
Right.
faster. Let's look at it that way.
Anything else? No? I have some comments, if I could. I just want to thank Mr. Bagdanian and his staff regarding the concern I had the last meeting we had regarding there was a signage on Glendale Avenue and where Rolf's is, when people are trying to make a left turn getting in the parking structure, I believe they reduced the signage, which you can see the incoming traffic now. So I want to thank your staff, Mr. Bagdanian. The other questions I have is just for curiosity. On Kennett and Grandview, there's some construction going on. And I was wondering what's going on in that neighborhood. Is that something that has to do with the
There is a
water line?
There's a combination. The pavement. We have some major failures on Grandview that is kind of currently being. There's a major reconstruction going on, and it's taking some time because there are some pockets of base of the pavement that has failed over the years, and they're trying to get them all fixed at the same time. So that's the reason that you see those.
Do you know when would that be complete approximately?
I don't have it, but I'll be happy to send you any information as to when they expect to complete it.
Okay.
10 days, that's what I
10
have.
days from now? Okay. The other curiosity I have is, I know tomorrow at council there is a bike lane action item. Is it a bike lane or is it
I can answer that if you
Yes.
don't mind me jumping in here. Colin Bogart, who is the Place Grant coordinator for the LA Bike Coalition. A couple of times, I believe it was Council Member Najarian had asked for a presentation on how to get involved with biking in Glendale and what you needed to know about how to select the proper bicycle and the proper equipment and where to get educated and trained if you needed that. And so that's what that agenda item is. Colin is going to be coming before the City Council to basically give them a, biking in Glendale 101, how to get started and
Okay. All right.
where to find information, all of that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Weissman. And the other thing that I have a question for, on Doran going east and west and Lexington going east and west between Geneva and Maryland, when folks, there's a bunch of apartment units down there, when they park, and if you decide to go either east or west, at one point, at every corner, you are forced to take the double yellow line because folks are parking all the way to the edge, and it becomes very narrow at one point. So I was wondering if staff can look at that and to see if we can do some kind of red zone just at each corner where traffic can move, because if there's an incoming traffic on the opposite side, someone is forced to stop or they would take the double yellow line. And that happens also on Lexington. More on Doran than Lexington. Lexington is a little bit wider.
Okay, we'll look
if you want to look at that. And the last thing I have is, I'm just curious, since I believe it's been 2 years almost, we have the cameras installed. I believe one on Glendale and Mountain, and one on right here on Glendale and Broadview. The red light cameras. Just how many did that alleviate a lot of accidents we had? How many traffic citation we had? Just for information only for this commission.
Mr. Chairman,
to get that big improvement or not?
I have requested that information from the police department. As soon as I get it, I will bring it to them. But we have had, there are quite a few citations that have been issued at the intersection that have red light camera. And they've broken down into left turn citations, right turn citations on red. And I will definitely be happy. I know the data exists. There's a report that's being prepared. And I will make sure that the commission receives a copy of the report at least.
Okay.
Again, if I can jump in, the company that Glendale contracts with for the red light cameras, their contract was recently extended by the City Council as a consent item. I'm not sure if it was last meeting or the meeting before that, but the council packet for that consent item, I think, may have that information in it.
Yes, that's what I intend to send it to the commission directly, because it's already been to council and they wanted to extend the contract for a short period of time.
And I missed one bullet here, if I may. This is regarding the speed lump that we have in Rossmoyne area. I've been hearing complaints, people speeding on those lumps. They don't take they cross the yellow line and they're just going over the lumps at 40 to 50 miles per hour. And the complaints I'm getting is from Cedar and Stalker or Cedar and Dryden, that neighborhood. They're not taking their proper lane. They're just going over the lumps. If Lieutenant Povolitis can check on that if possible. And that's during the rush hour, either 7 o'clock in the morning until 10, and then in the afternoon. From 4 to 7 or 4 to 8. That concludes my comments.
Okay.
Next, you have questions?
I just wanted to mention briefly about, I guess it was about a week and a half ago, there was a large volunteer effort to help conduct a pedestrian and bicycle count for the city of Glendale. And as I'm sure most of you know, the City of Glendale's bicycle master plan, which dates back to 1995, is being dusted off and being given a new look. And in preparation for making decisions on which of the routes on that bicycle master plan are going to be implemented first, there needed to be a data gathering effort to do an actual count of bicycles and pedestrians. And I participated in that. It was, I'm not going to say it was a lot of fun, for sitting for 2 hours in a lawn chair with a clipboard making notations on all the bicycles and pedestrians that go by. But it was, I think, a very good effort. We had a large number of volunteers, and I hope we're going to get some good data out of that we can use to help us implement some of the pieces of that 1995 bicycle master plan. One of the intersections that I worked on 2 different intersections during this count, and one of them was on Saturday, a week ago, Saturday, at Honolulu and La Crescenta. And just wanted to mention that while I was there, I had a couple of senior citizens who walk in that area come up to me and ask me who I was and what I was doing. So I kind of explained it, and they said, "Can you please mention to Traffic and Transportation that the pedestrian walk length for crossing Honolulu is too short for some of the seniors to make it in time." So I just wanted to bring that up as a comment that I got from a citizen, that particular intersection. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Weissman. What's next?
Item 7, adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
We adjourn. Thank you.